Gamers of the Underworld. Chapters 324 to 350. Chapter 324. It's showing a health bar. Victoria's construction pace was fast and exceeded Lancelot's expectations. He thought that the few thousand humans, fairies, and elves were nutcases. They started logging trees at a rapid pace, clearing empty land, transporting wood, and constructing the foundations of buildings. Someone drew a few blueprints of buildings as a guide on a wooden board. Besides the buildings, they started planning for different areas. The first area to be built was the living quarters. Besides the living quarters, the wood logs were used to make a surrounding wall. It had only been 2 days. Lancelot was shocked. When he thought about the limits of organic life, he saw unlimited possibilities. He observed the back view of an exhausted human who was sitting on the ground and eating. Lancelot walked over, wanting to chat with them on a basic level and ask them what motivated them to work so hard. Were their families that poor? Lancelot thought that the exploited laborer would be full of tears as he bit on the bread that was as hard as a bat. He thought that he would use a tree branch to draw out the picture of his little girl. Lancelot had encountered such scenes many times. After all, life was hard, and poor laborers lived especially hard lives. When Lancelot walked over, he saw the human putting clay from the ground into his mouth with a blissful smile. "Wait, what are you doing? Don't give up hope." Lancelot stopped the human who he thought was swallowing clay to kill himself. What kind of hard labor and immense pressure would cause such a human to give up his life? Lancelot was excommunicated, but he didn't forsake his belief. Humans who killed themselves were unable to ascend the heavens. "I'm eating my meal." The human was taken aback. When he realized it was Lancelot, he was unbelievably happy. Lancelot had never seen such a happy being. Strange encounter mission. "I have encountered the legendary strange encounter mission." The human shouted loudly, and gamers started to gather around him. The figures in the forest with shimmering eyes moved towards him. Numerous humans, fairies, and elves looked as though they had found their dream goal. In the darkness, he overheard their conversation. His luck is so good. He encountered the strange encounter mission just after the start of service. "Why haven't I encountered a strange encounter mission? I'd like to have one." Selling clay, selling clay. The quality is soft and tasty and of fresh stock. The clay seller is a cheat. He just grabbed the clay from the ground to sell. Who's selling bronze coins? I'm accumulating at high prices. Victoria's first guild, Hoodlum Yoga Association, is already registered. Come and register fast. It's only been 3 days, and we have a guild? The rich gamers are scary. We have more rich gamers than you can imagine. Lancelot looked to the sides. He felt chills running down his spine from the glimmering stares of those creatures. Their clothing was tattered, and their hands were badly hurt after 2 days of continuous work. They were filthy because they hadn't bathed for 2 days. Even though a river and a lake were nearby, they didn't have the habit of bathing. Or perhaps, they were too busy to bathe. It was understandable that their lives were hard, but the creatures just slept on the ground while ants crawled over their bodies. Could they not find a higher tree? It wasn't the time to ponder. Those creatures came closer, and Lancelot became nervous, grasping the hilt of his sword instinctively. "What are you doing?" A helium voice was heard, and Lancelot looked over. It was the 3 hamsters who followed Duchess Lilo. One of the obese hamsters charged at Lancelot and shouted, "Don't idly chat with them. The Duchess is looking for you, follow me." Lancelot heaved a sigh of relief, releasing his sword hilt and following the hamsters. The surrounding creatures gave way, but they continued chatting. "Ah, I thought it was a strange encounter mission, but it's only a plot." "A plot is pretty good too. We have been carrying bricks, constructing houses, and clearing land. Won't we get bored if we don't have some entertainment? Why aren't there any maps for us to fight monsters on the surface world? I want to fight and sacrifice for Victoria City. I only want to save the world." Lancelot was getting used to their strange conversations. However, he was also worried. Could the insanity be infectious? The hamsters led Lancelot to the castle that was conjured by Lilo, a place that the gamers were unable to get close to. "Were you going to hack at them?" the second boss hamster asked Lancelot. "No, but I noticed your hand grasping your sword hilt. Don't do that again. After all, you have signed the contract. Don't ever attack them. Otherwise, there will be severe consequences," the second boss said gravely with his helium voice, frowning. That's right, you'll have health bars, Big Boss said. Do you have things to eat? The fat otaku hamster looked at Lancelot with anticipation. Big Boss slapped Fat Otaku's head and said, "What did I say? You'll die if you eat things on the ground. You'll die. There's the sacred light, so don't eat indiscriminately." Things on the ground? Lancelot was dumbfounded. He felt that he heard something important. "No, it's nothing. Please go in quickly, don't keep the Duchess waiting," Big Boss said as he pushed Lancelot from behind, pointing to the door in front. Chapter 325. The materials arrived. Lancelot inhaled deeply and opened the door to the room. This was Duchess Lilo's study, which he wasn't looking forward to seeing. After observing the rows of bookshelves and the variety of books, Lancelot was a little surprised. In the middle of the bookshelves were the others. Duchess Lilo sat behind a table, and in front of her were the dark-skinned and muscular elf, Untouchable, the dwarven twins, Hill and the King, and the Grand Priest, Baldhead. They turned their heads to look at the approaching Lancelot. "Sir Lancelot, take a seat," Lilo said in a soft voice as she pointed to an empty chair. The voice sounded as though it carried mana, making him feel as though a high and mighty queen was talking to him. But actually, it was a girl that appeared no more than 12 or 13 years old who sat behind the table. Lancelot did a knight's salute to Duchess Lilo before sitting down. Lilo took out several pieces of paper and distributed them to the 5 people, saying, "The papers indicate your work assignments. Once the roads and buildings are constructed, you'll have to start working." Lancelot received a piece of paper and looked at the dense words, surprised to find that the words looked like Sherlock's handwriting. His first reaction was that it was written by Sherlock instead of Lilo. Perhaps Sherlock was the master behind Victoria? It was quite possible. Lancelot examined the paper. "The respectable Sir Lancelot, when you are reading this letter, you will have been in Victoria for 3 unforgettable days. I hope that you are enjoying your stay with the citizens of Victoria City. Even if you're not happy, it's all right, because you will soon realize that they are a bunch of fearless and hard-working heroes. I hope that you haven't fought with them. Otherwise, I'll have to look for another knight to teach them. It's a joke. I hope that you won't mind. If you have survived the 3 days without incident, I believe that you will have a lot of questions. Don't ask. Even if you ask, nobody will tell you. Let me explain your future work to you. 1. From tomorrow onwards, you will officially be Victoria City's combat skills trainer, and the citizens of Victoria will look for you to learn combat skills. You will conduct combat skills training from 7 a.m., with each session lasting for an hour with a rest period of 10 minutes. You may use your discretion in regard to the training content and the number of trainees. 2. If you need their help, please feel free to ask them directly. If they can do it, they will be happy to help you. 3. You may receive Duchess Lilo's missions, which I hope you can complete. 4. If you see evil underworld creatures appearing nearby or hear about them from the citizens, do not report it to the human kingdom. Because Victoria City is the authentic shield of civilization. 5. Please read the contract and abide by all the terms in the coming days. 6. The citizens of Victoria City will build a specialized house for you. Please do not reject their efforts. 7. The citizens of Victoria City use a virtual currency. If they want to pay you, you only need to inform them that the payment is 100 bronze coins. Do not exceed a silver coin for each training session. 8. If I think of something else, Duchess Lilo will inform you. 9. Welcome to Victoria City. May the Sacred Lord bless you. Victoria City, Development Office. Lancelot finished reading the letter. He didn't recall seeing any development office. Perhaps the workers were the 3 hamsters? The others also finished reading their letters. Lancelot wanted to peep at the king's letter, but he had no intention of sharing and crushed the letter into a ball after reading it. If you have finished reading the letters and have no other questions, then go back and rest. My assistant hamsters will help allocate houses to you. The 3 fat hamsters stepped forward, and one of them said, "Please follow me." The employees of Victoria City stood up and followed the 3 hamsters. Lancelot heard Duchess Lilo's voice as he was striding out. "Sir Lancelot?" The young Duchess Lilo frowned and muttered to an invisible figure before quickly looking at Lancelot and saying, "Please wait for a while, I have a special mission for you." Lancelot stopped, while the others followed the 3 hamsters out of the study. Once the door was shut, Lilo looked at Lancelot and said, A batch of materials will be arriving near Victoria City tonight, and we have to arrange manpower to transport the materials. We haven't scouted the area yet, and the citizens may have some careless slip-ups, so I need someone to supervise them. Will you accept the mission? Apologies, Duchess, I have just arrived for the job, so if the materials are important, you may want to let your hamster assistants take over. Perhaps, Lancelot pondered before replying, but Lilo wouldn't accept his refusal. She said, the hamsters will be following you. After leaving my side, they will become nervous easily. It's not inherent, it's due to the unfamiliar environment. After much consideration, you're the best choice. If you trust me, I'll complete the mission. Lancelot nodded and said, good, get a head count of the laborers. There are a lot of materials, so bring as many men as possible. Lilo nodded and gestured for him to leave. Chapter 326. Entrance. Lancelot accepted Lilo's mission to be an escort and a supervisor. Would anyone expect the half-naked and merry gamers who put clay into their mouths to have any combat power? The three hamsters were guides who would lead the way. After arranging the accommodation of Lancelot, Untouchable, Hill, the King, and Baldhead, they started doing a head count of the laborers. It was already midnight, but the group of humans, fairies, and elves weren't sleepy. While Lancelot and the three hamsters were looking for manpower, more gamers gathered and requested to help in transporting the materials. It was Lancelot's first time encountering laborers risking their lives at midnight enthusiastically. He guessed that they probably had great ambitions and goals, else they wouldn't be so passionate. They chose thousands of gamers to help with transportation, and the contingent set off for the materials. Under the lead of the three hamsters, they arrived after walking for more than 2 hours. It was a sloping cave that was near the forest of Victoria City. Though it wasn't a long journey, Lancelot felt tired because the citizens of Victoria chatted too much. Even though Lancelot told them many times, there are many wild beasts and bandits in the wilderness. For your safety, please keep quiet. But it was of no use. They would only keep quiet for a maximum of 3 minutes before they would continue chatting. The sound level would be like mosquitoes buzzing before escalating to thunderous proportions. Lancelot gave up after failing to restrain these insane chatting gamers. They weren't worried about their lives. He had reminded them of the consequences, but it was in vain. The feeling was like bringing out a group of children on an excursion, only, there were thousands of children with only a single teacher. It was a hopeless feeling. It's right below. Big Boss pointed at the swirling energy vortex in the dark cave. Lancelot instinctively shouted, wait, is this a tunnel into the underworld? This is beyond our control. We have to ask the Holy Church to deal with this. Lancelot felt the gamers quiet down. Then, one of the gamers shouted, gosh, Underworld? Is the faction war starting so soon? Don't stop me. I'll kill those dogs from Eternal Kingdom. We have a blood feud. Can we go in? I can't wait. Lancelot almost fainted when he heard the gamers. They were originally peace-loving creatures, but now they were shouting to invade the Underworld, kill Shirley, imprison Evelyn, and raid Winterfell. Lancelot scolded the gamers before he controlled them. The gamers looked in anticipation at Lancelot, but he was not bothered. He said in a loud voice, do you have a misunderstanding about the Underworld? Do you think the Underworld is a peaceful and friendly place? Let me tell you, they have the cruelest gnomes who kill and rob all your valuables. Someone whispered, the game AI is taunting the gamers directly? I don't know, but I felt delighted when he said that. Gosh, me too. Lancelot observed that they were happy instead of fearful, so he quickly said, and those evil superior devils, they only know about destruction, chaos, and calamity. Any of the superior devils will be able to conquer and enslave us. They will kill all of our family members and children while the world descends into a living inferno. This isn't a joke. If you don't realize the seriousness of the matter, you'll become the sinners of the world. Now, give way so I can return and report to Duchess Lilo. It's impossible for the materials to appear in the Underworld. We can't open the door to the Underworld. Lancelot finished his speech, but before him, the three hamsters were ordering the gamers to enter the tunnel. They didn't seem to hear Lancelot's words. Wait, you can't. Lancelot wanted to stop them, but Big Boss came out and said, enough. We know that you're nervous, but our materials are inside, and I guarantee that it's safe. After some thought, Big Boss said, for the time being. Lancelot had severe doubts, but he thought of a possibility. Perhaps they were using the Underworld tunnel as a secret transportation route. Sherlock and Duchess Lilo were no simple characters. They had the means to summon thousands of diligent workers from the teleport portals. Could a mundane creature do that? Do you want to join us? You may wait outside if you want, Big Boss said as he walked into the Underworld entrance and looked at the hesitating Lancelot. Lancelot gritted his teeth and walked in. They weren't afraid, so Lancelot felt ashamed that a knight like him would be scared. Moreover, he accepted Duchess Lilo's mission, and he had to complete it. Chapter 327. Lancelot's Speculation. When the cold mana flowed over his body, Lancelot was in the dim Underworld tunnel. The walls were gray, and numerous glimmering vines twirled with each other, with some even seen moving slowly. These incandescent plants provided luminance to the dark Underworld. It was Lancelot's first time in the Underworld. After Michelangelo was defeated by the surface world and the Heavenly Kingdom, the Underworld disappeared from view. He hadn't heard of any entrance to the Underworld being opened. Lancelot could only hear about the Underworld from legends and books. This is crazy? Lancelot looked at the dim Underworld that looked like the apocalypse, and terrifying BGM rang beside his ears. Please don't blow this kind of whistle, okay? I'm covered in goosebumps. You trash. Haven't you seen enough on the discussion forum? What's there to be afraid of? It's hilarious that you're such a coward. Lancelot looked at a few half-naked humans who walked past him. They didn't have any nervousness or fear and looked as though they were having fun on the surface world. Walk briskly and don't fall behind the contingent. Otherwise, there's no reward. The voice of the big boss hamster was heard from the front of the contingent. Lancelot inhaled deeply and soothed his nervousness as he rejoined the contingent. They marched for 10 minutes and arrived at a crossroads. It was there that Lancelot saw the materials that Duchess Lilo talked about. There were ores, chests, equipment, and other miscellaneous items. Most of them were carcasses and body parts of the Underworld creatures. Who had the power to mine the ores and kill these Underworld creatures without being discovered? Lancelot now had a better understanding of Sherlock and Duchess Lilo's background and capability. It was time to work. Even if he had questions, he had to restrain himself. Even if he asked, nobody would tell him anything, like what was said in the letter. Wait, what was that? Lancelot discovered footprints in the area where the gamers were working hard. Those footprints weren't from humans, fairies, or elves, as they were too big. Lancelot walked over and knelt down, examining the footprints that looked like those of huge creatures. Could they be the creatures that transported the materials? He discovered lumps of warm mass and frowned as he sniffed. It had the smell of strawberries, and he used his metal glove to poke it. NPC. Why are you touching Beetleman feces? If I hadn't seen the feces on the discussion forum, I'd touch it too. Don't you think that the feces looks like wet marshmallows? The feces is an important material for making bladder bombs. This is too wasteful. Wait, why is there Beetleman feces here? Perhaps the Beetlemans were traveling here. Nobody reminded Lancelot when he was sniffing the feces. When did they appear behind him? Did they follow him? The three hamsters stood akimbo at the side as they supervised the gamers, who were transporting the materials to the surface world. What are you doing? Make haste. Miss Lilo won't allow her servants to slack. The three hamsters came forward and scolded the gamers, who quickly went back to work. Lancelot was in deep thought, still thinking about the strawberry smell. The important point was the small footprints around the huge footprints. Though the small footprints were shallow, Lancelot could recognize that they were made not long ago and that the owners wore standard metal shoes. These materials were just transported here, but there was only a tunnel. Lancelot looked at the path that they had taken. This was the first fork of the tunnel, and Lancelot was sure they hadn't met anyone along the way. The creatures who transported the materials didn't leave the Underworld. Perhaps they had gone deeper? Lancelot investigated the footprints that led deep into the Underworld. He thought about the suspicious Sherlock, as well as the Duchess Lilo, who exhibited mana skills. He also thought about the abnormal humans, fairies, and elves, as well as the massive amount of materials, the unknown creatures that transported the materials, and the countless footprints. In an instant, he came to a conclusion with a possibility of 99%. That was, Sherlock and Lilo were powerful characters who loved the human world and fought against the Underworld with their strong faith. They fought for the races of light and peace, obtaining the materials after killing the Underworld creatures. The carcasses proved his point. The unknown creatures that transported the materials must have returned to the underworld to continue their fighting. The surface world was rife with power struggles, and it was hard to imagine that there were many people who fought for love and world peace. Lancelot was moved, convinced of his speculation. What else could it be? Could Sherlock be an underworld devil with his own dungeon while Lilo was his management puppet? Could these citizens of Victoria City be disguised souls of the evil goblins? Could Sherlock have used these vile underworld creatures and the Beetlemans to transport the materials here before leaving? Impossible. Chapter 328. Edward Scissorhand. Darkness engulfed a hilltop of the York territory. It was late at night, but nobody could sleep. The hill was a stockade for 200 powerful bandits. Their boss was called Edward Scissorhand, as his wrist was chopped off. The perpetrator of the torture was the Duke of York himself. Since then, Edward's hand had been replaced with scissor-like blades. The history of his escape, his becoming a bandit at the stockade, and how the Duke of York cut off his wrist was condensed into a 100-word story. The entire York territory was fearful of Edward, who had a new target, the group of insane half-naked humans, fairies, and elves who were walking like a parade late at night. He could sell them off as coolies, while some could even pass as bandits. "Chief, we have scouted the area. Though they have large numbers, besides a fully armed knight, nobody else has a weapon." A filthy subordinate who hadn't bathed for many days walked to Edward and said excitedly, "A few of the female fairies and elves are gorgeous. They'll be worth a fortune. Let our comrades enjoy them first before selling them. Get them to wash our clothes too." Edward said to the bandit behind him, causing the bandits to cheer loudly. "Fantastic. Those gals look strong. They will make our clothes very clean. We're in luck. Don't compete with me. I want the most beautiful, most fragrant, and strongest gal to wash my clothes. Their clothes are so clean, so they'll definitely do a good job." "Oh my God, you're such a genius." The bandits were excited, and even Edward was smiling merrily. "Chief, take a look. They're coming out." The bandit beside Edward pointed at the cave nearby excitedly as a stream of people walked out carrying goods. Edward picked up his binoculars and took a look. "That is diamond seam ore." Edward fixed his gaze on the goods that they were transporting. Besides the ore, there was also gold and silver. We're rich, chief, we're rich." Edward's henchmen shouted excitedly. "Everyone, get ready. We're about to make a big haul." Edward Scissorhand waved his hand and ordered his bandits. His band of bandits was extremely excited, and they immediately set off once Edward gave the order. The 200 bandits were taking on 1,000 humans, fairies, and elves. It seemed like the bandits were overestimating their capability, but their targets were unarmed. According to Edward's experience, he didn't need to kill that many of them. With the flashing of their weapons, most of their victims would kneel down and beg for mercy. Even if the victims resisted, they wouldn't cause much harm. Once Edward and his bandits killed off 100 of them, they would lose the willpower to resist. Even if there were 10,000 of them, they would be captured obediently. Even if there were unexpected circumstances, Edward was sure they could outrun their victims on horseback because their targets didn't have horses. The bandits roared as they rode their horses towards the parading contingent of 1,000 creatures. Lancelot waited in the underworld for a while, ensuring that there was nobody nearby before he went outside the cave. Lancelot discovered that Sherlock was the first line of defense against the forces of evil and that Victoria City was different from the other cities and kingdoms that were creating trouble. His thoughts were with Sherlock. After all, he was a knight that had to fight for love and world peace. Lancelot went to the cave entrance after not finding anything amiss. He knew that the York territory wasn't peaceful and that there was a powerful band of bandits roaming about. Nobody knew where their base was, and the passing merchant bands were greatly harassed by them. Lancelot had performed escort missions through York territory before and knew the power of the bandits. Though he wasn't defeated previously, he was now escorting 1,000 vulnerable humans, fairies, and elves without weapons and armor. Though the delivery had some equipment, the armor was of a smaller size, unsuitable for humans. They were only suitable for fairies. While they could use the available weapons, they belonged to Victoria City, and Lancelot couldn't distribute the equipment without prior approval. Lancelot went through the teleport portal that connected the underworld and the surface world. When he returned to the surface world, he felt the fresh air and was perked up. Seeing the quiet darkness in front of him, Lancelot was optimistic. Though the journey was going to be long, he didn't think there would be trouble. Just then, he noticed pebbles quaking on the ground. Lancelot felt chills on his head and understood the meaning from experience. He dropped prone and placed his ear to the ground. There was a loud approaching rumbling sound coming from the ground. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! Everyone, pick up a weapon. Prepare for battle. As a knight, fleeing was never his first choice. Moreover, he was escorting the materials. Besides, even if they abandoned the materials, where could they escape? An honorable fight was his first choice. He cried out as he ran into the underworld, shouting to the crowd, "Pick up your weapons. We are preparing for battle." Chapter 329. That's my horse. Edward rode on a horse as he led more than 100 bandits, who screamed as they charged toward their targets. He noticed that most of the half-naked humans, fairies, and elves were handsome guys and beautiful gals. Edward was very pleased, and he disregarded the weapons wielded by his targets. The way they held the short swords showed that they couldn't fight properly. Was he getting old, or were they underestimating his combat power? Ooh la 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 la, kill all of them, Edward shouted excitedly. He was going to enslave his targets and sell them for money. There were so many of them, and it wasn't possible for Edward to kill all of them. He was anticipating their surrender. Lancelot inhaled deeply, with both of his hands grasping his longsword. He shouted to his comrades on the left and right, "Steady. Don't flee, steady. Remember, you're fighting for Victoria, for our glorious ambition." Though Lancelot tried to increase their morale, he was ready for the collapse of their formation. As an experienced knight, he could see that his comrades were all inexperienced in combat. Even a 3-year-old kid could wield a sword better than them. They had no other choice because they couldn't throw away their weapons and surrender. Lancelot only hoped that these greenhorns could endure a bit. There would be serious casualties, but as long as they maintained their morale, even if they didn't have combat techniques, they had a chance to defeat the bandits, who couldn't be highly skilled in combat. While Lancelot was busy thinking of a solution, the figures in front of him moved. Some of them even charged and screamed. Lancelot wanted to stop them, but before he had a chance to shout, the whole lot of them had charged out while screaming. "Don't compete with me, that horse is mine. That horse is mine. I want that horse. I'm accumulating horses, buying all horses. 1,000 renminbi for each horse. I'm buying without limits. Don't hack at the horses, just hack at the bandits. Horses, here I come. Wah!" The group of humans, fairies, and elves acted as though they had never seen a horse before. Though the bandits didn't have good equipment, they were still considered cavalry. Why were the half-naked creatures charging against cavalry? Lancelot couldn't bear to see what came next. When the cavalry and the crowd collided, what ensued would prove that there were no miracles in this world. Edward's horse collided with a human who was blocking his way. The frightened human was trying to evade and didn't dare use his weapon to stab at the horse. Edward was full of disdain for these creatures. Even if they charged valiantly, it was a rash act in the face of death. A cornered mouse would bite when it panicked, but these 1,000 creatures weren't even fit to be mice. Ha 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 ha. Edward laughed heartily as he swung his longsword at the surrounding enemies. He wasn't nervous at all. He was sure of victory. Eggface walked down from a beetlemon's back, exhausted. As Sherlock had arranged for Eggface to visit the surface world before, Eggface was assigned to be the guide for leading the materials convoy to the realm boundary between the underworld and the surface world. Sherlock explained the reason he didn't go personally. He said, "I'm staying in the Dungeon Lord main hall to research some matters." He opened up the computer game interface as he spoke. Eggface had returned to Eternal Kingdom. He let the green-skinned creatures take care of the beetlemen before returning to the Dungeon Lord main hall to report to Sherlock. 30 minutes later. "Like that, I completed my mission. I want to play for 5 hours starting tomorrow," Eggface said in a daze as he dragged his exhausted body to the corner of the room. That was the spot for his temporary nest. Eggface curled up his body and placed his head under his tail. Then, he covered his body with his wings, cupped his claws at his chest, and began to snore evenly. Sherlock glanced at Eggface and placed a blanket on his body. Then, he focused his attention on the crystal ball. The images in the crystal ball showed a group of horse-riding bandits being sieged by a torrential horde of humans, fairies, and elves. These insane creatures weren't bothered by the fact that they could be killed by kicks from the horses. They hugged the legs of the horses, and some even pounced on the bodies of the horses. The bandits hacked with their weapons a few times before they were surrounded by the gamers. Even if the gamers were seriously wounded with broken hands and legs, they weren't in any way afraid. The group of native bandits was engulfed by the torrent of gamers. Sherlock shut down the images in the crystal ball. There was no need to observe the battle any longer. Lord Sherlock, the security of the surface world leaves much to be desired. There are so many bandits, even within the Baron's territory. Tisk, tisk, what a decadent world. Let's help them quickly. Let the light of the devil Sherlock illuminate their land. Though Brew spoke excitedly, Sherlock's reaction was very measured. He nodded in response before saying, "What do you think of the design of my new scene? It's a common entertainment location for the gamers of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City. I've even thought of the name, Spider's Crossroads." Sherlock said happily, "I thought of the plot as well. I'll narrate the plot at Eternal Kingdom, while Lilo will do her part for Victoria City. I'll be able to use the Spider Queens that I bought and enrich the plot and game content at the same time. This is the perfect plan thought up after playing computer games for many days. Lord Sherlock, you are a superb game producer. I believe the gamers will be engrossed in your plot design," Brew said respectfully. "No, that's not important. The main thing is to build a neutral city that the gamers of Eternal Kingdom and Victoria can stay in together." Just as Sherlock was about to explain his plan, Brew quickly said, "Lord Sherlock, I have to interrupt. Professor Bacon is coming to Eternal Kingdom via the Winterfell teleport portal." Chapter 330. Sherlock's Suggestion. "It has been a long time since we last met, Lord Sherlock. I hurried over once I received your letter. I must say, I didn't expect Eternal Kingdom to expand so rapidly. It's only a matter of time before Eternal Kingdom overtakes Eternal Fire," Professor Bacon said as he drank some bloody chrysanthemum tea, which dripped down his bones and splattered on the ground. "Managing a dungeon is a hobby of mine. I have other businesses to manage, and they are making me dizzy." Sherlock sighed and looked tired. "You have to clean up the mess left by the Merchant Alliance as well." "Ha ha ha ha, I'm joking." Bacon cracked a joke casually. One was a superior devil, and the other was a specter. They weren't of the same faction as the Merchant Alliance. Creatures are unpredictable nowadays. Many of them don't know the cruelty of war and want to create trouble. "The young lads are getting out of hand," Sherlock said with a heavy heart and talked like an elder. "Yes, the age of war?" Bacon looked like he was recalling the past. "I asked you here regarding this matter." Sherlock massaged his temple, while Professor Bacon leaned forward and asked, "Is it regarding the Merchant Alliance? How can I help you?" "No, it's about war." Professor Bacon was shocked, saying, "War? Did a dungeon declare war on Lord Sherlock? This is shocking. It's not a war between dungeons. The Devil Management Committee won't allow private wars." "No, I'm referring to the creatures from the surface world," Sherlock said. "My dungeon is close to the exit to the surface world." "I suppose Professor Bacon already knows about this?" "Yes, I know. It's about a day's journey." "I'm worried for you," Professor Bacon said with a frown. "I'm worried about it too. I arranged for my collaborative partner to deal with the situation after a group of humans discovered the entrance." Professor Bacon was dumbfounded. "Deal with the situation?" "Yes, by letting my collaborative partner become their leader." Sherlock spread out his hands and said, "As you know, the power games of the surface world are more serious than the underworld. They see power as more important than anything else. With power, even though I'm a superior devil, I could become a leader there. In the underworld, if a grand priest wanted to be a leader, Sherlock wanted to say that it was impossible, but he suddenly thought of Beast, who was a grand priest and a believer of the sacred light. Therefore, he amended himself and said, It's a tricky problem. That's not my main point. I had a new idea after controlling the humans who discovered us." What idea?" Professor Bacon didn't know how to react. If the tunnel connecting both worlds was discovered, those wild humans could invade the underworld. However, Sherlock wasn't panicking and had even arranged for his collaborative partner to be their leader. It was hard to tell whether the collaborative partner was his servant or not. "I'm worried about the learning situation of the Spectre College's students. I understand that the Spectre College will conduct combat exercises for the students. If we consider the possibility of a war with the surface world, if they don't practice hard, when it's time to fight the surface world, it may be too late. The creatures of the surface world look weird, so I'm afraid the liches will be given a fright when they see them, Sherlock said with concern. You are right, Lord Sherlock. So you're saying, make use of this chance to create a new instance dungeon. I mean to create a new collaborative relationship. The lives of the surface races aren't important and aren't worth a cent. Even if they die in Spectre College, nobody will care. I can lead them to Spectre College and contribute to the teaching of the college. Sherlock said with integrity. Lord Sherlock, I'm very touched. I would like to thank you on behalf of the principal and the parents. Professor Bacon stood up as tears welled up in his eye sockets. He said, since Lord Sherlock controls the humans, why don't you capture them and create magic stones? It's quite efficient to use human souls to create magic stones. I'm thinking about it. I thought about it. But money isn't as important as the education value. Of course, I can collect some fees, which are mainly to cover the costs. As you know, constructing teleport portals and transporting humans incurs costs. Professor Bacon was moved, and he said, of course. If that's the case, let's discuss the details. Lancelot was dumbstruck by the incredible scene. 200 bandits were slaughtering the crowd viciously, but they discovered that these humans, fairies, and elves didn't surrender, nor did they have fear. They only had eyes for the horses, trying all means to kill the bandits in order to obtain the horses. The extreme insanity made Lancelot fearful. He didn't waste his effort finding the 3 hamsters as they had stayed hidden since the start of the battle. The bandits started to waver and collapse, but the battle didn't stop. The horses left by the bandits were limited, so there was another new round of battle for the possession of the horses. Chapter 331. Developing the Spider's Lair. Seeking mystical white. Selling horses. Selling less than 50 horses. Those with the buying power, leave a note in the post. Limited to buyers in the Victoria faction. Darkness engulfed the forest. Edward panted heavily, his eyes blood red and his shoulders full of teeth marks. He grasped the prosthetic of his left arm, which was tugged off. Without the protection of armor, a chunk of flesh was bitten off the back of his hand. Edward didn't know what had happened to him. He only knew that he was high-spirited and wanted to enslave all the humans, fairies, and elves. Before he finished laughing, he was swallowed by the terrifying horde. When more than 30 of the bandits fell, without Edward's order, the bandits had retreated. Edward didn't notice that though many bandits perished, none of the horses were hurt. Even when the gamers were trampled by the horses, they couldn't bear to harm them. Edward had never suffered such a severe setback. He looked at his body, which was full of injuries, unable to express his deep pain. Chief. The adjutant behind Edward walked over and said softly. Edward thought that he was going to console him, but this setback had left him disheartened, so he waved his hand and said, "Don't say a word. This is my mistake, I've let down my brothers. I'll fast tomorrow to mourn the dead. Chief, I'm not talking about this. We caught a prisoner." The adjutant pointed to the back, after which, 2 bandits escorted a deformed human to Edward. The human was in an incredible pose, his spine looking very distorted. There was also an unknown word above his head, hoodlum. The gamer, hoodlum, could only make muffled sounds because he was gagged. Bring him back for interrogation. Edward waved his hand, and the bandits brought hoodlum away. Melee_invincible. Gosh, were you so vicious while going after the horses? You even killed your own comrades? Nai Shen Yi. Will a kind-hearted person give me a horse? Enrico Pucci. While the citizens of Victoria City are suffering, I'm in Eternal Kingdom showing off in front of a darting bird. Ask Void Priest. Continue bragging. A darting bird requires doing daily missions and 2 monthly missions. You have exchanged for 2 darting birds, but the Mash Inspewer's reputation points started less than 4 months ago? Sherlock browsed the posts on the discussion forum and found that the gamers were discussing the attack of the bandits last night. There weren't many problems since it was only a group of bandits. However, Sherlock took notice of a post. I have successfully infiltrated the bandits' hive. Sherlock looked through the post and found that the content wasn't complex. It was made by a gamer called Hoodlum. In the battle last night, he was captured by a few bandits and imprisoned in a cage. They were torturing and interrogating him, but he said he was all right and that his life wasn't in danger. He would continue to observe them, to see if there were any subsequent missions. He could practice lock-picking during his free time. They are really free. Lord Sherlock, do you intend to let the gamers of Victoria City participate in the daily teachings of Spectre College? Brew asked with concern. There's nothing wrong with that. They can have entertainment at Spectre College while they hone their combat skills. Most importantly, we can obtain magic stones as a reward. Is there a more profitable business? Sherlock countered with his argument. Indeed, there's not. However, if the Underworld gets to know that Lord Sherlock is that close to the surface world, there may be leaks of the doppelganger precious pearl. If you're worried they may try to steal the doppelganger precious pearl, don't be. They would have to attack the dungeon core of Eternal Kingdom since the doppelganger precious pearl has been fused into the dungeon core. Lord Sherlock, I'm worried about this problem. Sherlock wasn't bothered by Brew's concern. He said, instead of worrying, think of how to develop and strengthen the dungeon. Are all the required materials here yet? They have all arrived, Lord Sherlock, Brew said respectfully. You've purchased 100 spider queens. Did they cost a lot? No, it's the requirements for 10,000 gamers. Mission title: Excavate the underground spider's lair. Mission description: We conquered the underground spider's lair, but we didn't locate the spider queen, who could be hidden deep in the underworld. Warriors, let's find her. Mission reward: reputation points and game currency. When Peasant received the mission, he took a shovel and a pickaxe and boarded a beetleman at entrance number 1. There were many gamers like him who were going to the spider's lair. Peasant couldn't help recalling the past. When he first joined the game, he followed tens of gamers and entered the spider's lair timidly. He remembered the nervous feeling when he saw the ugly underground spiders. The first beta gamers used a lot of effort to overcome that sense of fear. He hadn't entered the spider's lair for a long time as it was a specialized training ground for beginners. Peasant, being a veteran, was at the marshland of the marsh inkspewers to hunt for large lizards. There were also dire wolves and underground spiders at the marshland. When he returned to the spider's lair, many places had changed. A group of gamers was very bored, so there was a constructed beetleman shelter at the entrance of the spider's lair. According to the gamer who constructed it, he wanted the gamers who were waiting for the beetleman to be protected from the elements. The walls and ground were full of graffiti and symbols. After it upgraded to level 3, Eternal Kingdom's dungeon core had consolidated the spider's lair within its boundary. The greatest change was the teleport portal that was under construction at the entrance. The game was replacing the beetleman train system with a teleport portal. Chapter 332. I'm calling for a meeting. Clank. Peasant swung his pickaxe at the wall. The pebbles that flew off the wall fell pit-pattering on Peasant's helmet. The gamers at the side used their shovels to clear the excavated diamond seam ore. The ore was transported outside of the spider's lair, then transported back by gamers who received specialized missions. Due to the influx of gamers, Eternal Kingdom was facing land scarcity, and it was becoming overcrowded. The usage of resources increased dramatically, and they were running out of diamond seam rocks. Aside from using these rocks to produce equipment, they were also used as construction materials. Eternal Kingdom had an abundant supply of these rocks. Did Raintia come today? A gamer asked as Peasant was working his pickaxe. I don't know, I didn't see her. Peasant thought for a while before replying. Did Raintia quit the game? She hasn't been online for many days, the gamer said with uncertainty. Peasant shook his head and said, I don't know, but it's a pity if she quit the game. After all, she's almost like an iconic NPC. Have you finished excavating for the day? I'm almost done. After this excavation mission, I'm returning to Eternal Kingdom and heading to the Marsh Inkspewer town for my daily mission. Oh, after you finish your daily mission, wait in the dungeon to be a replacement for the expedition team. We're creating a new expedition group tonight. Peasant reminded him, and he said, okay. They started chatting about other topics. Outside the excavation site, an underground spider peeped out and was immediately killed by the gamers. It was normal to kill monsters in the excavation area. Arthur threw the head of a large lizard to the ground. The bones, skin, flesh, and claws were cleanly sorted out. The skulls of the large lizards were to be submitted to the Marsh Inkspewers for completing missions. Thank you for your bravery, Arthur. Salted Fish expressed his gratitude to the black-armored Arthur. He had a deep impression of this black-armored gnome. Arthur would submit the heads of these hateful large lizards to him daily, and the other gamers mentioned Arthur occasionally. After some time, Salted Fish got to know about the famous Arthur. Arthur nodded at Salted Fish, while the gamers at the side showed their admiration and said, "That's cool." The NPC called his name directly. "It's awesome to be the top gamer." Sylvanas was proud of Arthur and felt she was being praised as well. "I have finished my daily mission, so let's challenge the instance dungeon. I'll shout for them to gather." Not Wearing Pants clapped his hands, and Burning Chest Hair said, "Make haste. We spent an hour just to organize a team the last time. There was no choice, not all guild members were free. Besides, we added a lot of new members. Many veterans are mentoring the beginners, and the game map is extremely huge," Not Wearing Pants said after hearing Burning Chest Hair's complaint. "Hurry and organize the group." "Stop talking," Sylvanas said. "Wait for a while, Pants," Arthur shouted at Not Wearing Pants. When Not Wearing Pants turned his head back, Arthur said, "I'm not challenging the instance dungeon today. Find a replacement for me, I have an important meeting tonight." Okay, I understand. If it was a meeting, then there was no choice. The game shouldn't affect the activity of real life. Not Wearing Pants nodded, but Sylvanas looked disappointed. She hesitated but didn't say anything. Arthur walked towards the shelter with many darting birds. After choosing a huge darting bird and getting on it, he said, "I'm going offline. Have fun. See you. Bye. See you tomorrow." Everyone bade farewell to Arthur and watched him leave the Marsh Inkspewer town on the darting bird. Sylvanas looked unhappy, stamping her feet and muttering to herself, "Arthur Bro doesn't have a meeting today. He must be investigating Raintia." "How do you know?" Not Wearing Pants asked instinctively. "I just know." Sylvanas left in a huff, jumping on a darting bird and not looking back. Not Wearing Pants and Burning Chest Hair looked at each other in surprise. "What shall we do? What's this about?" Burning Chest Hair asked, bewildered. "How should I know? She's not a gay but a scary girl." Not Wearing Pants shook his head and said, "You don't have a meeting and aren't jilted. Are you game for an expedition?" In a luxurious hall, a game capsule opened itself slowly. A young lad sat up in the game capsule while female servants gathered to provide service. The person who sat up was the rich young Master Ma. "Young Master Ma, the plane is ready. The hospital has been contacted, and we can set off at any time," the butler said as the young lad changed his clothes. "I understand. Prepare to leave." The young master nodded and walked out of the grand hall. Looking out of the glass corridor, he saw a huge airport. A guiding vehicle was leading a mid-sized airplane to the runway. Behind the young master were 100 servants and bodyguards. Take a Spearhead stood by the carpenter workshop while holding a large ladle, stirring a cauldron. Sealhead Ling Chong ran over and shouted, "Gosh! Take a Spearhead, did you hear about it? Raintia was hospitalized." Chapter 333. Version 0.31 Update Log. "What? Raintia was hospitalized? What? Raintia was hospitalized because she was pregnant? What? Raintia was discovered to have a malignant tumor while being hospitalized for pregnancy? What? Raintia was hospitalized for a malignant tumor, was discovered to be pregnant, and will soon die? What? They're holding Raintia's funeral? Lord Sherlock. It seems like the gamers are extremely concerned about Raintia. From the online analysis, Raintia is dying. We can consider a memorial event and create a specialized coin called the Raintia coin. Each gamer will be entitled to a limited edition coin for the price of a magic stone or a gold coin. This Raintia coin will be used to exchange for plant seeds. The best way is to employ an NPC that looks like Raintia. As the cost may be too high, we'll just sell for the memorial coin." While Sherlock was browsing the forum, Brew suggested this seriously. "I know Lord Sherlock can't understand, but believe me, these gamers are nostalgic. If we organize a memorial for Raintia, it will boost the prestige of the game developers. Perhaps they won't complain about the game producers anymore. They're unhappy with my game planning?" Sherlock wasn't bothered until he heard the last sentence. Of course not, Sherlock's plan is perfect and flawless, so nobody will feel unhappy with Lord Sherlock, Brew said immediately. So we don't have to do such a thing. I think that the information isn't reliable." Sherlock pointed at the computer screen and said, "The servers will be conducting 4th beta testing. Please take a look if you want to have a 4th beta testing status. Latest pet eggs from Shirley's Strange Encounter mission. selling 1,000 gold coins, confirmed in reliable gold coins. I will kill swindlers and their entire families. I have seen the posts, and while the creators sound authentic, they're fake. It does happen frequently. Before confirming the information, I don't intend to organize any activities. Even if Raintia died due to illness, I don't intend to do anything. Do I look like a philanthropist? Sherlock said. Brew replied thoughtfully, Lord Sherlock, I'm too emotional. You're an unfeeling devil. Yes, that's what I thought. Sherlock nodded and continued to type on the keyboard. He was updating new game content. Version 0.31 update log. We added new Victoria City gameplay. Random bandits. During the initial development of Victoria City, the surrounding area is unstable as there are many evil forces watching us. Those terrifying bandits who were forced to commit crimes and kill other people are wandering around Victoria. There are many bandits in the vicinity of Victoria. Take up arms and defend your honor. We refined the new scene. Underground Spider's Lair. Due to the bravery of the citizens of Eternal Kingdom, the Spider's Lair is no longer a threat. But those evil and vile creatures with multiple legs won't give up. Many Spider Queens have arrived in the Spider's Lair, and they aren't only a threat to Eternal Kingdom. We added a new Victoria City scene, Teleport Portal Main Hall. The gamers of Victoria City will be able to travel via the teleport portal to the Underworld Spider's Lair and participate in the battle against the underground spiders. Brave warriors, while you fight for your faction, don't forget that a group of spiders is watching you. We added a new ride, horses. Different horses have different quality. There are only horses in the Victoria City faction, but it doesn't mean gamers from Eternal Kingdom cannot ride them. Gamers can have any ride if they obtain control of the reins. The appraisal of horse quality requires 1 silver coin. We added a new future plan, a Spectre College dual faction instance dungeon. The Spectre crisis isn't only Eternal Kingdom's problem. It's also Victoria City's problem. In the future, both factions can choose to fight against the Spectre forces. We added a new future plan, Neutral City. We plan to create a new city at the Dark Crossroad. This neutral city will allow gamers from both Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City to live together. There will be new missions, reputation points, new maps, and, most importantly, a new factory. We are in the development phase, and the plan won't be abandoned. We added a new bug, Return of Weapons. The gamers of Victoria City obtained many weapons during the fight against the bandits. Please return the weapons voluntarily. Otherwise, your reputation points will be set to 0. Don't try to be smart, we can track every weapon, even those that are hidden in the wilderness. We have left a wildcard, which I will add once I think of it. Sherlock published the update once he checked through it. He had to implement every item in the updates. The first was the Spider's Lair, followed by the dual faction teleport portal. Sherlock was concerned about the development of the Spider's Lair because it was a training ground for beginners. As there were no tunnels that lead to anywhere, it was an ideal location for a sealed training ground for beginners. Underground spiders were also extremely affordable food, so Sherlock could save on buying food. If both factions could enjoy the same entertainment ground, then Sherlock didn't have to build a new entertainment outlet. Chapter 334. New Spider's Lair. Lowly Lord Gloom. It's in progress and won't be abandoned. Call me Swindler Baichi. Randomly give out horses. Fat Hara. What is with the bug of returning the weapons? Smiling Nangong. I'm not cheating. I threw the weapons in the wilderness so that I'll have a surprise in the future. Sherlock's post garnered many responses. The gamers were excited and happy over the updates. Sherlock was used to his job of maintaining order in the game, creating new gameplays, designing new plots and scenes, and negotiating new collaborations. He felt a sense of satisfaction after seeing the excited and surprised gamers. It wasn't the time to be complacent, as Sherlock had many things to do. Firstly, he had to clear the gamers from the Spider's Lair so that he could deploy the new Spider Queens. A Spider Queen wasn't a spider with a human body. It was twice as large as a normal underground spider, especially its belly. Compared to Sherlock's body, it wasn't really large. Normally, Sherlock would reduce the size of his body. Sherlock had a simple way to clear the gamers from the Spider's Lair. The Spider's Lair is undergoing maintenance. All gamers who are performing missions, please vacate the lair within 10 minutes. When the system notice appeared before the gamers, all of the first beta and second beta gamers left immediately. Only a few third beta gamers were stubborn and remained in the spider's lair. 10 minutes later, all of the gamers in the spider's lair were forced offline. Then, Sherlock piled them up together and deployed 10 spider queens next to them. The unrestrained spider queens regained consciousness and started gnawing on the gamers. Sherlock was going to set them free. The size of the spider's lair was greatly expanded, so Sherlock could still deploy 10 spider queens. Soon, the lair would be populated with various underground spiders. In fact, there might even be more underground spiders than there were previously. The gamers from Victoria City and Eternal Kingdom could use the lair as their playground. Sherlock was pleased with his plan. Class is starting. Class is starting. Lancelot's combat training is starting. In Victoria City, the gamers weren't bothered by the rumors surrounding Raintia. They were more concerned about the game content. An elf called Great Centenarian rode a large horse, inviting envious and jealous stares from the other gamers. Lancelot recalled the frightening incident 2 nights ago while he gazed at the gathering humans, fairies, and elves. Coach, class is starting. Class is starting. The gamer's shouts interrupted Lancelot's thoughts. He suppressed his fear and began a new round of training. Today, I'm teaching basic combat techniques. A fat hamster ran on a grass patch, while a group of humans with green words above their heads were dragging a large wooden log to a designated location. The fat hamster walked through the crowd, ignoring their stares, and went straight to the green castle. He pushed open 3 main doors and ran to a pink room. 2 other hamsters were standing by the room entrance. One of them was carrying a basin of water, while the other hamster was soaking a towel in the water. The hamster that ran over placed both his hands in the water and wiped his head, tidying up his messy hair. Big boss, Miss Lilo has just cleaned up. She's now changing clothes, said second boss, who was cleaning the towel. Can we go for our meal? Fat Otaku was carrying the basin of water. Come in. The voice of Lilo was heard coming from the room. Big boss braced his body and knocked on the door, then opened the door and walked in. Miss Lilo, I have completed the morning routine. I'm here to report to you. Big boss said as he walked in. Lilo sat in her chair and nodded. Second boss and Fat Otaku stepped in with a towel and a meal cart. Second boss placed the towel in front of Lilo and removed the hair from the towel while Fat Otaku pushed the meal cart to her. Lilo started eating her breakfast. 200 citizens are logging the East Forest, 500 citizens are excavating in the West Mine, and the remaining citizens are constructing Miss Lilo's new city. It's very good. Lilo nodded, and Big Boss said, they are in awe of Miss Lilo's aura, and none of them are slacking. I saw an exhausted human who was near death, but he continued working before collapsing to the ground, Big Boss said excitedly. That human performed 10 missions that required carrying logs. It's hard to imagine how he did that. It must be due to Miss Lilo. Lilo caressed the head of Big Boss and said, that's good. What about the teleport portal? Is it completed? Don't worry, Miss Lilo, the teleport portal is completed. We can be teleported directly to, the spider's lair. Big Boss said. Second boss asked curiously, why did we create this teleport portal? Because it will provide food for us? Fat Otaku's face was full of radiance. Of course not. According to Sherlock, it is for the citizens to relax. Since it's completed, we'll go according to plan. Lilo stood up and pushed the meal cart away as she said to Fat Otaku, I had my fill. You eat. Fat Otaku was excited and gulped down the remaining breakfast. Chapter 335. Plot. In a rusty cage, a human, Hoodlum, who had a deformed spine, lay within. Below his name were the words, Hoodlum Yoga Association. A fierce-looking bandit holding a basin of steaming water walked over. He approached the cage and splashed the steaming water all over the human. A few bandits stood by the cage while Edward Scissorhand crossed his hands and gazed at the prisoner that he was going to interrogate. The body of the human was emitting steam. The splashing of the steaming water was just a prelude and the temperature just right. It provided stimulation but wouldn't harm him. However, the deformed human didn't wake up. Dead? Edward asked curiously, and the bandits by the side shook their heads. They didn't know what happened. A bandit checked Hoodlum's neck for a pulse. Chief, he's alive. Get another barrel of water. Ice cold, Edward ordered. A few bandits carried a barrel of freezing water and splashed it on the human, but Hoodlum didn't respond. If it wasn't for his breathing and his beating heart, they would have thought that he died. Feigning death? Was he hiding from reality due to fear? Edward didn't believe that the deformed human would faint. After all, they hadn't interrogated or tortured him for the past 2 days. They didn't even talk to him. Afraid that he might freeze to death, they found dry clothes for him. They treated him like their dad. And he passed out? It seemed like this human was due for a beating. Edward had many ways to deal with an uncooperative prisoner. Strip him. Break his will. Edward roared, and the eyes of the bandits lit up. They stripped his clothing and started to tickle him. They were very familiar with such a procedure. Edward was in disbelief when there was no reaction from the human. Edward thought that the human might have really passed out. As Edward was considering killing him and throwing his corpse in the wilderness, Hoodlum gradually woke up. He opened his eyes and discovered that he was stripped of his clothes. He then saw an ugly bandit sitting on his stomach while a few bandits restrained his hands. Hoodlum was agitated and shouted, "Gosh! Is there such a thing in this game? How did it pass censorship? Is this LGBT?" Edward's scissor hand dashed forward and covered his mouth, his scissor hand positioned at his throat. "I don't know what you're saying, but let me tell you, I'm Edward Scissorhand. I'm not a person to be fooling around with. If you make a fool of me, I'll remove all of your hair, even your nostrils." Edward intimidated him, and the bandits gasped in shock. Some bandits even pretended to cry and said, "Oh God, even the nostrils." "Shush, don't talk." Edward looked pleased at the reactions of the bandits. Then, he saw Hoodlum gaping. He was probably scared stiff, or at least, that was what Edward thought. "Tell me your name," Edward demanded fiercely. "Leahow." "No, I'm Hoodlum." "Where are you from?" "Victoria City." Edward grasped Hoodlum's collar and slammed him against the cage. Hoodlum's head smashed against the metal grill and emitted a loud, pom sound. Edward looked viciously at Hoodlum and said, "Victoria City? The kingdom doesn't have the Victoria name. Do you think you can fool me? It's the truth. You're cutting my nostrils, so why would I deceive you? For my nostrils, I'll not lie. I swear upon my hair." Hoodlum's shoulders trembled, and his face became maroon in color. Edward relaxed his grasp. This human was too weak. Edward didn't use that much force, but he was unable to take it. Edward was starting to believe him, so he asked, "What were you carrying?" "Diamond seam rocks, weapons, and equipment. I don't know about the rest." "Where is this Victoria City?" "I don't know the exact location because I followed 3 hamsters. If you take me back to the cave, I can try to backtrack and locate the city." Hoodlum's eyes lit up. "Don't think I don't know what you're up to." Edward threw Hoodlum into the metal cage before shutting the metal door. He ordered the bandits, continue to interrogate him. "I want more information on Victoria City." Yes, they were going to beat up Hoodlum. The gamers were curious about the new maps. The Spider's Lair wasn't considered a new map since the gamers had already fought against the spiders. However, the official website claimed that it was a revamped map. Before the new map was officially opened, the monsters attacked the dungeon. A few underground spiders appeared at the entrance of Eternal Kingdom and attacked the gamers in a frenzy. Before long, the fully armed gamers defeated the spiders. As they were about to distribute their loot, they discovered that they couldn't move the spiders. Sherlock came out from the dungeon and looked in surprise at the underground spiders. He muttered in astonishment, "How can this be? These underground spiders, they aren't the same as before." Chapter 336. New Map, Spider's Lair. Sherlock walked to the fallen spiders and the spider that was cut into 8 pieces. Sherlock looked grave as he shouted to the gamers, "Warriors of Eternal Kingdom, these spiders have been contaminated by the Void Army, and their bodies are filled with dark energy. I have to investigate the truth. Follow me, warriors." Sherlock walked in the direction of the teleport portal main hall, and the unrestrained gamers chatted excitedly while following Sherlock. Sherlock walked to a teleport portal and placed his hands on it. Mana was transferred to the teleport portal, and a mana portal was created. The teleport portal to the spider's lair was officially opened. Sherlock waved his hand and said, "Proceed on, warriors. For Eternal Kingdom, for the Underworld. Destroy the Void Army contaminated spiders and stop them from attacking our homeland." The gamers received many missions related to the spider's lair, then dashed into the portal, shouting as they did. The plot is unconvincing. How did the Void Army advance to our doorstep? Are you serious? Why are you so concerned about the game plot? I feel that the lousy game producer is fooling us. I can't wait to get over these plots. The quality of gaming and playability are the most important. The gamers muttered and walked through the portals. They were going to attack the spiders in a bid to protect Eternal Kingdom. A plot proceeded similarly in Victoria City. After cleaning up, Lilo wore her pretty Western costume and left the castle with the 3 hamsters. After restraining the citizens of Victoria City, she walked to the teleport portal in the forest. She placed her hands on the portal and activated it using mana, then said, "Good, you may enter the spider's lair." The plot ended once she returned to the castle. The unrestrained gamers discussed what just happened enthusiastically. Was I insulted by the game design just now? I haven't encountered such a lame NPC before. I'm unable to hold back my masochism. Miss Lilo, I'm willing to protect you with my life. Draw your sword, you trash. Lilo's my wife. DMN, get out of the city. I'm going to stab you to death. Stop fighting, Shirley's mine. Is anyone concerned about the underground spiders? We're supposed to rescue the world. Don't talk about saving the world. My mind is full of horses. Can you give me a horse? I'm forming a new expedition group. Welcoming all gamers who have completed the beginner's combat training. It's hilarious. We have more than 100 simulated battles with the underground spiders in our minds and have a comprehensive plan to exterminate them. Do we need to attend the beginner's combat training? The gamers chatted noisily, but most of the gamers ran towards the teleport portal. A lot of them hadn't completed their beginner's combat training, but they couldn't resist taking a look, as they could only see the underground spiders on the forum previously. Continuous hordes of underground spiders waited for them at the other end of the teleport portal. Peasant didn't expect to see that many spiders in the spider's lair. He thought of bringing the new guild members for an orientation at the spider's lair, but he perished during the orientation. The gamers set off for the spider's lair after Sherlock invited them to fight against the spiders in the plot animation. This time, 5,000 gamers from Eternal Kingdom and 5,000 gamers from Victoria City were going into the lair. Though the second beta gamers were battle-hardened, they were shocked when they entered the lair with the novice third beta gamers. In just a day, the entrance of the spider's lair was infested with underground spiders, whose heads were smaller than the previous underground spiders. The gamers were complacent because they killed the spiders easily. Then, they proceeded deeper into the spider's lair. The first and second beta gamers were quite familiar with the layout of the interior of the spider's lair. Even if the lair was expanded, it was excavated by the gamers. When they entered the spider's lair, they discovered that things weren't that simple. Numerous spiders flooded out from the lair and massacred the gamers. There were too many spiders, and they were very strong. The spiders were all black in color, with their skin looking as though it was covered by a layer of metal. The super spider was like the Fedoli soldier ant. The unaware peasant led the new guild members against the spiders, and they didn't even last a few minutes. All of them revived in Eternal Kingdom. Gosh, the spiders were too strong. This meant that the loot would be good, especially when the new kind of spider was a species that the gamers had never seen before. The reason that the spiders were so strong was that the purchased Spider Queen was caught from the wild and had unparalleled strength. Sherlock wasn't stingy, especially when it came to the gamer's entertainment. The new spider's lair map would provide the gamers long hours of entertainment. While the gamers were exploring the spider's lair, young Master Ma had arrived at the hospital in the Otherworld. He took out a photograph and examined it before walking into the hospital. Chapter 337, Reforming the Commercial Area. Sherlock was refreshing the forum pages continuously, but he didn't see the content that he was interested in. According to his experience, after spending large sums of money to create the new spider's lair, the gamers should be enthusiastically discussing the strategy guide and heaping praises. On the third page were some insignificant posts about the underground spiders, but they garnered pitiful responses. The previous 3 pages had similar content to the first post on the first page. Rich gamer and powerful gamer fought against each other. Raintia was hospitalized due to illness. She is the faction goddess. The content was about Raintia being ill and hospitalized. It wasn't known when Arthur visited her and met another mysterious, powerful gamer, but a conflict broke out, and they fought with each other. The post hinted in many ways that the powerful gamer was Dragonborn. The post garnered incessant replies. What's up with the gamers? I spend so much effort to improve the spider's lair, and they don't show any appreciation. Yet they show a great deal of concern for an insignificant gamer? Sherlock frowned as he asked. Even the humans in our world will focus on the king and not a princess. Lord Sherlock, don't be bothered. It's a matter of excessive hormonal secretion, Bruce said. The effect of the new map is very good. The gamers lost a huge amount of equipment due to their deaths in the lair. According to the long queues at the blacksmith shop, we are reaping a handsome profit. Good, follow my plan to continue construction. My goal is to expand the living quarters, Sherlock ordered. I understand, Lord Sherlock. As your loyal servant, I have a good suggestion. We have a large space in the commerce area, but we don't have any shops. This isn't good for our business operations. I suggest letting the gamers buy the shops via auction so that they can sell their own goods. We have to stop the trend of the gamers setting up impromptu stalls and selling their goods, designating a specific location for their stalls. Bruce said, of course, whether it's a commercial shop or an impromptu stall, we have to charge processing fees, management fees, dungeon beautification fees, duties, utility fees, breathing fees, tolls, and other miscellaneous fees. You're right, won't they protest? Sherlock nodded and asked, I'm sure they'll be unhappy. However, as the number of gamers has increased dramatically, there is hardly any space to walk in the commercial area. We have to put some measures in place to prevent the situation from worsening. Bruce said forcefully. Sherlock nodded and decided to use Bruce's suggestion. Sherlock didn't feel a need to create an update for the shops and impromptu stalls, only needing to add details to the original post. After that, he would let the gamers carry out the plan. Eggface was sleeping in his nest. Yesterday, he played computer games for a long time while Lord Sherlock was out. He had to pay the price. Before he could rest, Sherlock called him up. You played games through the night while I was away? Eggface didn't panic. Due to his black skin, his dark eye rings couldn't possibly be seen. No, I didn't. I slept soundly last night. Eggface didn't know that Brew was whispering to Sherlock. He went offline at 3 a.m. I'm giving you a mission, Eggface. Sherlock pointed to a few barrels of dye in the dungeon lord main hall and said to Eggface, who was trying to open his eyes widely, get some green-skinned creatures to draw lines. Eggface stood at the plaza outside the dungeon lord main hall, next to numerous barrels of dye. He chose a few gamers from a gathering crowd and brought them to the commerce area. The chosen gamers cheered, while those who weren't chosen complained and went to perform other missions. On the way to the commercial area, the gamers behind Eggface chatted incessantly. Sylvanas busted the rumors. She said that Arthur visited Raintia but didn't fight with Dragonborn. Gosh, it's for real? That's not busting rumors, it's confirming the truth. How did Arthur know Raintia's location? How did Dragonborn know? How'd I know? Wait for the latest 818. Eggface didn't understand what they were saying and wasn't interested. He wanted to complete Sherlock's mission and go back to sleep. Let me take a look. Eggface sat on the ground and placed his long tail behind his back as he grasped Sherlock's diagram and examined it. Start drawing the line from here, Eggface said as he walked all the way to that spot. Then leave a space of 2 meters before drawing another line. That's it. The gamers obtained the barrels of dye and the brushes from Eggface before starting work. The work wasn't complex. In fact, it was relaxing with good rewards. The gamers were working diligently, and before long, they drew out thousands of boxes. They were aligned closely to the walls of the commercial area, appearing like car parking spaces. After the job was completed, Eggface ordered the gamers to paint on the wall. After the drawings were completed, Eggface clapped his hands and said, "We're done. In the future, you can only set up stalls here. If you flout the rules, you'll be subjected to penalties." Eggface spoke as the gamers gaped in surprise. A gamer shouted, "Gosh! There's news on the official discussion forum. The game is updated. This time, it's about setting up shops and stalls." Chapter 338. Little Fairy's Request. Creating new shops and stalls? Lilo looked outside the window. There was a huge amount of construction going on, and more lands were being cleared. Rows of houses were built according to the game's designs. Lilo gazed at another part of the forest that hadn't been cleared. Arrange the shops and stalls over there. First shop along the street. Auction begins. Brainiac grasped a small hammer and knocked down with a pom sound. The gamers immediately started shouting. 10 magic stones, 20 magic stones, 50 magic stones. Everyone else should get lost. The first shop belongs to Dragon Raja. Ha, do you think you're invincible? 60 magic stones. Only the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance deserves the first shop. 100 magic stones. A black armored knight walked out and said, "Gosh, it's Arthur. Arthur has returned. Arthur, what illness does Raintia have? What about Dragonborn? Is that brat competing with you for the woman? Just a word from you, and we'll make his life unbearable." The gamers were excited, but the black armored knight left quickly. Brainiac observed the incident and recorded it quickly in his journal. He was researching the emotions of the green-skinned creatures. Then, he took out his small hammer and knocked down with a pom sound. He looked without emotion at the gamers and said, "We'll auction the subsequent shops." The gamers from Eternal Kingdom and Victoria City were having a fun time. Another gamer was also having fun, twice the amount. That was the imprisoned hoodlum. Hoodlum, who had a deformed spine, was taken out of the metal cage and thrown to the ground. A bandit stepped on his stomach and said viciously, "Because you're unwilling to talk, we were scolded by the chief. It's your fault. I've told you many times, I'm a gamer of Victoria City. We're all gamers of Victoria City, all 5,000 of us. Then there are 5,000 gamers in Eternal Kingdom. The leader of Victoria City is Lilo, a fallen angel, while the dungeon's leader is Sherlock, a superior devil. We're building a new city. I'm also the leader of the Hoodlum Yoga Association, Victoria's natural fighter." After he spoke, he was stomped and kicked. "Do you think we're fools? Even a fool wouldn't believe you." After the bandits beat up Hoodlum, they took out bandages and a magical potion to heal him. They adjusted their pants, stood up, and exhaled. "Great, come again next time." "Okay, I'll come again next time." Seeing the bandits leaving, Hoodlum took out a small metal strip discreetly and felt for the lock. He then started lockpicking. Hoodlum felt confident as his hands touched the lock. "I'm a locksmith, so how can you stop me with such a primitive lock?" "Humph, I'm looking for you not because I'm asking about that insignificant goblin." Sherlock didn't expect the little fairy, who was hugging her arms, to look for him. "Is the insignificant goblin Raintia?" Sherlock's face was hidden in the shadows. Both his hands supported his chin. "Yes, it's that goblin." "Humph, I'll never yield to you," the little fairy shouted. Eggface, who was using the computer to work, peered at the noisy and small little fairy. The little fairy was frightened by Eggface and jumped, but she quickly calmed down and looked at Sherlock with fortitude. "Ah, I have some impression of that goblin. I intend to kill her," Sherlock said casually. "Humph, don't lie, your servants don't die. I don't know what evil spells you have used to manipulate and control their souls, but Raintia is different. She wouldn't be helping such an evil devil like you," the little fairy yelled. "Why are you shouting so loudly?" Eggface complained as he was given a fright by the little fairy. His hand shivered and his computer game character almost died. "Find the Lord Overseer if you're unhappy," the little fairy rebuked. "What kind of fairy are you? Such an uncultured..." Eggface mumbled unhappily, but he didn't speak. "All the more reason I should kill her. She's useless and upsets my citizens. She has even caused fights to occur. Why should I retain her?" Sherlock sat in his chair and spread out his hands as he said, "I'm setting up a dungeon, not a charity organization." "Ooh." The little fairy gritted her teeth and hesitated for almost half a day before saying, "If you let Raintia go, I'll consider working for you. I'll produce intermediate potions for your vile servants. But I don't get any benefits. If you help me produce the potions, I can't earn many magic stones. To be honest, I'm not lacking magic stones, and I'm not interested in your magic stones," Sherlock said casually. The little fairy gritted her teeth and finally relented, saying, "I understand. I'll help you produce magic potions and teach those vile green-skinned creatures how to make them." "No problem. This is a fair deal, I accept." Sherlock snapped his fingers, and a paper and pen floated in the air. The pen wrote the contract on the paper, which floated slowly to the little fairy. "Of course, we have to sign a contract. These days, we are all particular about the upholding of contracts. We can't just take each other at our words. Don't you agree?" The little fairy didn't hesitate. She signed her name and said, "Deal." Chapter 339. Changing Factions. We've profited this time, but we have to make sure Raintia is safely back in Eternal Kingdom. Pardon my frankness, though you have absolute control over this world, you aren't able to do so in the other world. After the little fairy left, Bru said thoughtfully, "Why don't we employ a skilled performer and let them masquerade as Raintia? I have the character data, so it shouldn't be a problem with good acting. Besides, if the truth was ever unraveled, the consequences would be severe. Moreover, it reneges on the contract," Sherlock said. "I feel that the issue isn't complicated and should resolve itself quickly." "Lord Sherlock, do you have any information?" Bru asked, bewildered. Sherlock looked into a crystal ball that depicted Arthur and the Pioneer Alliance's gamers challenging the Instance Dungeon. They had 50% casualties, but Arthur looked relaxed. "Though I don't agree with being smitten by a common girl, Arthur, who was looking glum like the end of the world, is now happier. It seems like he has really seen Raintia and is sure she is all right. She should be back within a few days." Sherlock changed the image in the crystal ball to the excavating Dragonborn. Like Arthur, he seemed relaxed. "After gathering information from various posts and the surveillance of their chats, I have sorted out the series of events," Sherlock said. "Raintia neither quit the game nor changed her faction. Raintia's granny was having an operation in the hospital due to an accident, so she stayed behind to take care of her. Arthur and Dragonborn visited Raintia in the hospital and had a happy encounter. I'm not sure of what they said, but the official website received a faction change request from Dragonborn." "What? Dragonborn is changing to the Victoria faction? Where did he get the magic stones?" "The fee for changing factions is 100 magic stones." Bru asked in surprise. "I'm not very sure. They didn't talk about such things in their conversations. In fact, Take a Spearhead and Sealhead Ling Chong also submitted their faction change requests." Bru hissed and said, "What kind of a secret is there behind all of this? Is it the downfall of morality or the destruction of human nature? I don't know. The faction change must be related to Dragonborn's trip to Victoria City. Whatever the case, our problem is solved. Raintia will be back soon." As for Dragonborn's request, Sherlock muttered, "I think we can approve it. As long as Lord Sherlock is agreeable." Bru was subservient to Sherlock. Sherlock nodded. Victoria City required veteran gamers to help in its development. That Arthur is despicable. How did he threaten you? Dragonborn, tell me, and I will expose him on the forum and ruin his reputation." Take a Spearhead shouted angrily. Dragonborn patted his shoulder and said, "Arthur didn't ask me to change factions, it's my own will." Dragonborn looked awkward, and Sealhead Ling Chong said, "This is pretty good. We have the money to go to Victoria City. The prospects are better there, and I like the elf's figure. Our equipment and mana skills are wasted, and we have to start from scratch." Take a Spearhead sighed. "You can pull out. With your pitiful equipment and mana skills, it's not a big deal. The races of Victoria City look so much better, and it's not so crowded. Even if we demarcate our land and build houses, Duchess Lilo won't care. We don't even have to apply so long as we keep our buildings off the road." Sealhead Ling Chong said with anticipation, "When I go to Victoria City, I'll build a small castle. Nobody is to stop me. You guys don't have to follow me. You actually asked the entire guild to accumulate the magic stones for us to change factions." "That's two." Dragonborn sighed and said, "Please retract your faction change requests. You have accumulated so much equipment, don't you feel the pain? We can't let you go there alone without any friends, that would be pitiful. Arthur thinks that he can do anything he wants in Eternal Kingdom, and we can't deal with him here. Therefore, we'll go to Victoria City to deal with him." Take a Spearhead said furiously. "I said that Arthur didn't give me the magic stones to change factions. When we went to see Raintia, he was friendly to me. It's not him, don't misunderstand him. I'm changing factions because I don't want to make things difficult for Raintia. I thought it appropriate for me to go to Victoria City. Arthur didn't threaten me." Dragonborn repeated himself once again. "If not Arthur, who could afford 100 magic stones to let you change factions? He must have threatened you." "Don't talk nonsense. Would Dragonborn be easily threatened?" "Dragonborn must have his reasons for not saying." Sealhead Ling Chong appeared very wise. While they were chatting, the words appeared in front of them. "Your faction change requests have been approved. You will change factions 3 days later. The three of them looked at each other and said, "Shucks, that fast?" The gamers of the Pioneer Alliance failed in their attempt at the Instance Dungeon. However, they survived until the last boss. It felt as though the Instance Dungeon was easier this time. The first beta gamers left the Instance Dungeon exhausted. "I'm going offline. I can't take it." Sylvanas was also exhausted. The time was almost midnight. Before Sylvanas went offline, Arthur shouted at her, "Vanas, please stay back, I have a matter to discuss with you." Sylvanas perked up. Chapter 340. Underworld Prison. What? Dragonborn is changing factions? I didn't expect that. Isn't he the Springfield Flower Kindergarten Guild's chairman? I remember it's one of the top 10 guilds, and they had the intention to buy guild land. Why did he change factions suddenly? Tisk, is he jealous of Arthur bro? Is that why he defected to the other faction? The fee is 100 magic stones. I don't think Dragonborn has 100 magic stones. Sylvanas was unhappy with Dragonborn. I don't know what happened, I just saw the news on the official website. Do you know what happened? Arthur looked at Sylvanas, but she shook her head and said, "Let's ask Dragonborn. Though I don't know if he will be willing to talk to us. He must be very jealous of Arthur bro. I'll ask not wearing pants." Arthur nodded and left. Sylvanas looked at the back view of Arthur, bewildered. "That's very strange, Arthur bro. Darkness, chaos, wailing, and boundless despair." Bancasia was the most secure prison in the northern underworld. It imprisoned the most notorious criminals, like the ancient gods' believers who plotted against Winterfell. After being pronounced guilty, they were sent here. There was a new prisoner today, Andrew. After being the Winterfell dungeon lord for less than a month, and as the third successor to Eternal Fire, the prestigious Superior Devil had become a lowly criminal. Eternal Fire didn't comment on Andrew's predicament. Andrew looked glum as he sat at the back of the prison cell, which was constructed with special materials and methods, and chanted Sherlock's name. Sherlock had become his eternal nemesis. When Sherlock fought with Samael and saved Winterfell, he became the popular hero, while Andrew became a stone statue. He was like a fool who received no benefits and yet made Sherlock into a hero. The jealousy in him became a strong, invincible power that was about to explode. However, it didn't explode out. 9527. Time to take a breather. A fully armed orc used the shaft of his pike to hit on the metal grill, snapping Andrew out of his jealousy. Then, two orcs went in and placed strange handcuffs on him, which disabled his mana and inherent devil's power. With only his brute force, Andrew wasn't able to wrestle all of the orcs to the floor. Walla! Walla! Andrew dragged his handcuffs and walked down a long corridor under the escort of a few orcs. The words on the corridor were, "Who has not committed mistakes? He who corrects himself is the greatest. Sincere repentance is the gateway to your future. Turn over a new leaf and create a new life." These quotes were rather inspiring and provoked deep thoughts, but Andrew had no intention to repent. His mind was full of exacting revenge on Sherlock. Andrew was dragged to a wind shelter outside the room. It was surrounded by metal railings, and the ground was covered with sand. Many prisoners were standing on the sandy ground. Who knew how they managed to squeeze so many prisoners in such a small place? "Go in." The prison wardens weren't concerned. They pushed Andrew to the entrance before shoving him inside, then they shut the metal door. The prison was home to various races of the underworld. Everyone was vile, vicious, and took delight in others' misfortune. Some looked emotionlessly at Andrew, who just came in. A superior devil in this prison was a rare sight. A vampire stood up. He had the same handcuffs as Andrew, but the prison wardens didn't put a preventive mask on him. The vampire bared his fangs and said maliciously, "Newbie, I don't care how well you did before you came in, but now that you're here, you have to listen to me." The vampire nodded to the others behind him. Then, a gnome walked forward and took out a small tattered exercise book. He said to Andrew, "This is the test set by my big boss. Answer all of the questions correctly, and you'll be able to join us. If you answer a question incorrectly, we'll maim you." An orc came over and said fiercely, "Don't try any tricks. If you cheat, you'll suffer the consequences." The orc patted Andrew's chest and adjusted his cornea, then he leaned back and stared at Andrew. "Who do you think I am? Do you think I'm a nobody?" Andrew lifted his head and gritted his teeth. He said ferociously, "I'm the third successor of Eternal Fire, the most promising young superior devil. All the committee members of the Devil Management Committee know me. I almost obtained Michelangelo's relic. If not for Sherlock, I would already be the king of the underworld." Andrew spread out his hands and spoke with agitation, as though what he said had become the truth. He shouted at the creatures who intimidated him, "What kind of trash are you? How dare you put such a thing before me? This is an insult. I'll kill all of you, or I'll be beaten to death." Andrew lifted his hand and flicked the exercise book to the ground. The badly worn exercise book dropped a few of its pages, and the other prisoners gasped in astonishment. "Oh my God, what decadent trash! He's too vile, decadent, and cruel. It's going to be terrifying. The superior devil is going to have some bad luck." The eyes of the vampire became bloodshot with fury, and he pointed to Andrew as he screamed, "Kill him." Wait a moment. Before they had a chance to react, a creature calmed them down. They gave way and revealed a figure in the shadows. The creature opened his yellow eyes and asked, "Did you just say Michelangelo's relic?" Chapter 341. New Guild. Edward Scissorhand awoke with a fright in the darkness. In his mind, he saw images of the battle last night. The screaming, blood, inferno, and those terrifying monsters. Edward shook his head as a bandit came to the door and knocked, saying, "Chief, the Sacred Kingdom's slave merchant is here." "Good, bring that hoodlum over." Edward Scissorhand sat up and washed his face before walking out. A human wearing rich noble clothing and a golden ring stood in the main hall with a few servant escorts. That human looked nervous, and he said to Edward Scissorhand, "May the Holy Lord bless you, Edward." "Same to you, my dearest partner." Edward Scissorhand was familiar with this human. After a simple greeting, a few bound prisoners were brought in. One of them was the wounded hoodlum. Hoodlum looked attentively at the scene while he took screenshots in his mind. How could he miss such an exciting hidden plot? Why is there a handicapped human? The slave merchant looked at Hoodlum curiously. "I caught him the previous time. He is tight-lipped and unyielding, and while he has serious injuries, he is unwilling to betray his comrades. Though he's deformed, with such willpower, I feel that his handicap is insignificant," Edward Scissorhand explained. "I see." The slave merchant nodded and walked to a mother and her daughter. His eyes lit up, and he smiled as he said to them, "The little girl is quite a looker. Don't worry, when you arrive at my home, you'll help me wash clothes." "That's scary. Fancy letting her wash clothes at such a young age. Oh my God, it's inhumane. A mother and her daughter washing clothes together. Oh my God, why can't I have such a good thing happen to me?" The bandits chatted excitedly. It wasn't until Edward Scissorhand dry coughed twice that they became quiet. Edward Scissorhand then said to the slave merchant, "I'll sell all of them to you according to previous prices." "Deal." Hoodlum sat in a wavering carriage that was on a long journey. If not for the handcuffs and the fully armed guards, it would have been a perfect tour. Hoodlum was feeling excited, full of anticipation for the following plot. "Can you give me some space to lie down?" As the carriage was crowded, Hoodlum was unable to lie down. The two armed guards looked at each other and laughed. "Shall I release you from your handcuffs and give you a cup of iced orange juice? Behave yourself. Do you think you're on a tour?" Hoodlum was impatient and said, "No, I have an urgent matter. My mom is calling me." "Gosh, oh gosh," Hoodlum shouted suddenly and struggled violently. It felt as though he was being lifted. Then, he fell from the carriage. "Stop the carriage, a slave is escaping." The convoy that was carrying slaves became chaotic. The strange adventure of Hoodlum continued while the gamers of Victoria City were being stretched to the limit. The gamers were getting online, carrying bricks, fighting in the spider's lair, being tortured, carrying bricks, and getting offline. The gamers of Victoria City had limited plots. What about exploring the wilderness? The gamers tried exploring the surrounding woods, but there were no wild beasts. There weren't even animals larger than their palms. The surface world wasn't really safe. The problem was Lilo, who was a fallen angel. She disguised her identity with the doppelganger Precious Pearl, but primitive animals could feel the primal fear and thus fled. As for animals that were as large as a palm, they were threatened by Lilo and the environment, so they chose to wait for their deaths at their current locations. The gamers weren't aware of this fact and thought it was part of the game design. There were gamers like Marco Polo, who went adventuring. But who could bear walking alone without anyone in sight for 3 days? Victoria City also received big news. Dragonborn was changing factions. Though Dragonborn wasn't a rich gamer, he could defeat most of the rich gamers. Only the super rich gamer Arthur was his match. Hence, Dragonborn had high prestige among the gamers. Most of the powerful gamers depended on their superior equipment. If they learned combat skills daily, they wouldn't be that bad. Hence, the quality of equipment became the deciding factor in their combat prowess. But Dragonborn didn't spend a lot of money, depending mostly on his combat techniques to defeat many rich gamers. It was like a person without any protection using a wooden stick to defeat fully armed warriors. As a result, he was popular among the gamers. I feel that my current faction is the correct choice. Take a spear hit looked at his strong physique. As a human, it was far better than being a gnome. Most importantly, he could be handsome. Whether he was strong or not was another matter. Looks were a matter of a lifetime. Victoria City only had the metal coins currency, unlike Eternal Kingdom, which was using both metal coins and the magic stones system. All the fees in Victoria City were paid using metal coins. Therefore, changing factions required 100 gold coins. Comparatively, it was cheaper to set up a guild in Victoria City. Dragonborn didn't even have to fork out any money, as many unaffiliated gamers in Victoria City had accumulated money in hopes of having Dragonborn form a guild. They had even thought of the name. It was a mystery why they chose such a lame guild name, but with the encouragement of Take a Spearhead and Sealhead Ling Chong, they registered the new guild with the 3 hamsters, for that night with Sherlock. Chapter 342. A Guy's Romance. After going missing for 10 days, Raintia returned to the game, but she went offline soon after. This was because numerous gamers surrounded her and asked her questions regarding her relationships with Arthur and Dragonborn. With Raintia's demure character, she fell to the ground in an instant, going offline. The gamers knew that she was offline, but the happy little fairy didn't know. She only saw Raintia appear at the seedbed, get surrounded by gamers, and then faint. She didn't even have the chance to hug her arms and say, "Humph. I didn't help you tend to the plants for the past few days." Witnessing this, the little fairy spat her saliva like a machine gun, sending the gamers scurrying away like frightened rats. She then cursed and swore as she carried Raintia into her little treehouse. Arthur posted on the discussion forum and asked for a resolution to this matter. He didn't want anyone to discuss it and explained the details to the gamers. Recently, there were a lot of rumors. I will clarify that Raintia is dealing with family issues and that it's not what everyone has been guessing. As for our relationship, we're only friends. It's not as complex as the rumors. Please don't spread rumors. Though Arthur had expressed his view, he wasn't able to stop their curiosity. Their attention was short-lived, however, as there was another incident. Dragon Raja and the Meat Vegetable Rice Alliance, which were guilds at odds, fought with each other due to a shop issue, attracting a large number of spectators. Spectators were also attracted to a newly formed guild, Chang'an City. Most of the guild members of Chang'an City were third beta gamers. With strong financial backing, they created a large group of armed professional gamers. They openly challenged the Pioneer Alliance. Chang'an City's chairman, Mystery Man, said, "When we fight with the strongest. If not, we don't fight at all." The Pioneer Alliance, which had been a peaceful guild, fought with Chang'an City, even setting a date for a guild war. The experienced Pioneer Alliance achieved victory, but the headcount was astonishing. The Pioneer Alliance killed 210 enemies, while Chang'an City killed 99 enemies. The Pioneer Alliance was a powerful guild, but they lost 99 members. As for Chang'an City, they had exceeded 200 members, having reached the member cap of 300. Besides the Pioneer Alliance, they were the second guild to have 300 members. The game's attention was on the Chang'an City Guild. But this had nothing to do with Sherlock. At the Dungeon Lord Main Hall in Eternal Kingdom, the Hades Devil Kings have fully paid their compensation via the Devil Management Committee, for a total of 2 million magic stones. Half of the sum is for death compensation, while the other half is for Sherlock's mental distress. Evelyn carried a thick document and reported the situation to Sherlock. She was in charge of communicating with Winterfell. With Brainiac's help, Evelyn was able to take over the responsibilities smoothly. Though Evelyn didn't have strong capabilities and wasn't flexible, she was diligent. The tasks assigned by Sherlock weren't complex, most of them being the reception of Winterfell representatives and the assigning of missions to the gamers. With Bru's help, Evelyn wasn't required to deal with entrusting missions, assigning missions, mission summaries, mission rewards, or points recording. Basically, she only needed to sit in a daze. How's the material compensation from the Merchant Alliance? Sherlock sat behind the table and listened to Evelyn's report. The Merchant Alliance has transported the materials to Winterfell. They will arrange for the shipment to Eternal Kingdom in the near future, Evelyn said. Sherlock nodded. Since he rescued Winterfell from the clutches of Samael, the Merchant Alliance rewarded him with materials for alchemy and magical items. Though the materials had mana, the quantity was small, so they could be transported via the teleport portal. Sherlock had arranged for the materials to be used by the gamers to produce intermediate magic potions. The materials were also to be used by Brainiac in his creation of magical items. Once the magic potions and magical items were fully developed, and the gamers had mastered the skills, they could be placed in factories for production. The continuous supply of products would become Sherlock's wealth. Very good. Taking stock and sorting out the documents will be done by Brainiac. It's hard on you, Evelyn, you don't have to be bothered with them. Once you find a job, you may leave. Do more for your personal life. I'll feel embarrassed if you neglect your development. Sherlock looked at Evelyn and felt embarrassed. It's nothing, Lord Sherlock. I've stayed in the dungeon without paying for rent and food. I'm the one who should be embarrassed. I have been trying to find a job, but I'm unable to find employment. Evelyn looked disappointed and said to Sherlock, I'll have to impose on Lord Sherlock for some time. I like helping other people, Sherlock said while shaking his head. Evelyn was touched. Lord Sherlock was a good creature. Salary is being paid. Hurry and get your salary. Simba walked past the carpenter workshop and shouted to Mufasa, who was preparing meals. Cousin, help me get my salary. I'm unable to leave now. Mufasa held a large ladle, stirring the contents of a large cauldron. He threw the spider legs that were placed on the ground into the cauldron, which emitted loud bubbling sounds. Numerous gamers queued up behind the carpenter workshop, some even tapping on their bowls and shouting. I have no energy. When is mealtime? I'm carrying bricks after eating. Make haste, make haste. It's mealtime. I want to buy some clay to eat. The gamers were getting impatient. If you holler some more, I'll destroy all of your equipment. Simba roared at the noisy gamers who became quiet instantly. They looked innocently at Simba. Simba returned to the Dungeon Lord main hall. Brainiac, who was standing outside the teleport portal main hall, watched the commotion emotionlessly. He then gazed at Simba, who was walking in the direction of the Dungeon Lord main hall. Brainiac, we have finished with the transportation. The voice of Peasant came from behind Brainiac. Brainiac turned back and saw the empty teleport portal main hall that had just been full of boxes. A few blood-stained gnomes, who had obviously gone through a vicious battle, chatted merrily over there. Who knew how they managed to carry the materials? A total of 1,523 boxes of materials were transported and checked. Brainiac verified the records and looked at the excited gamers. They fell into a momentary daze before walking off and chatting at the same time, not greeting Brainiac. This mission was too simple. If only we had such simple missions daily. What was inside the boxes? There were tentacles poking out that cut me while I was carrying the boxes. I don't know, but the boxes weren't heavy. Gosh, why were my boxes so heavy? Brainiac waited for the gamers to leave before he recorded a few things in his journal. 565. Each of them has a person who can give orders and assign missions in their mental world. 566. With so many materials for magical items, my workload has increased again. 567. They are very afraid of Simba. 568. It's payday. Sparks were flying around in the Mana Hall. Mana engineer Yoda was manufacturing a 5-meter-tall robot with a group of goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. The leader was the goblin called Hemp Rope Technology. Yoda only helped to solve the mana propulsion problems and in contacting Winterfell for processed spare parts. Most of the manufacturing work was done by the goblins, gnomes, and houndhead men. Though they were very decadent with their calculations and diagram planning, Yoda felt a sense of achievement when he saw the robot about to be completed. He felt it was a huge leap in technology for such a product. Hemp Rope Technology said, We will sit in the pilot cabin of this 5-meter robot. With basic controls, we can control the robot to carry heavy items. If we install a drill, we can excavate with great efficiency. In the future, we will transform the robot into a combat robot with mana propulsion and super durable materials. Then, we can easily crush Shirley's head. Yoda wasn't sure who was Shirley, but he sounded like a powerful creature. Yoda felt that it was super cool, though he couldn't understand how awesome the robot was. After witnessing the robot prototype, he had a thought. This was a guy's romance. Chapter 343, Nicholas's Request. Sherlock was wearing his cloak while he walked around the dungeon with Eggface. The living quarters were expanded to such a large size that it required 20 minutes to finish walking. Each residential cave had a size of 100 square meters, and half of the caves were filled with 3-story buildings that were constructed by the first and second beta gamers. As the third beta gamers had just joined the game, they slept in the corners of the caves. Sherlock witnessed a few weak and pitiful goblins that carried tattered cloth and squeezed together with their friends in one corner of a cave. They used the tattered white cloth to cover themselves, even their faces, then said goodbye to each other. Simba, who was forging weapons, shook his head and sighed at such a pitiful scene. Sherlock visited the unsightly living quarters, which were like refugee camps. Then, he went to the little fairy's seedbed in the central administrative area that consisted of the Dungeon Lord main hall, the Lish's burial hall, and the teleport portal main hall. Next, he visited the forging area that had the large furnace at the core. The forging area was housing the blacksmith shop, carpenter workshop, mana engineering project hall, magical items production hall, and the alchemy room. The most popular location was the commercial area. The gamers had drawn the 500 enclosed boxes that were to be used for stalls, which was more than sufficient for the 5,000 gamers. The impromptu stalls were to operate on a first-come first-served basis. The duration was an hour and there was a rental fee to be paid. The commercial shops didn't have that many rules, and they could use the shops anytime after paying a monthly rental. Some gamers were curious why there was a need for commercial shops since there was an auction hall. The main reason was that every auctioned item was subjected to tax, while the commercial shop was only subjected to a single universal tax, so it was more economical to have a shop if the quantity of goods was large. The commercial shops were beneficial to guilds since they could provide benefits to guild members and act as a publicity gimmick. Once the price was determined in an auction, it couldn't be changed, but the prices in the commercial shops could be changed at will. In addition, the pleasure of shopping in physical stores couldn't be compared with standing and reading an auction list. The gamers preferred to check the auction prices before going to the stalls to obtain tax-free goods. When Sherlock came to make his rounds, the gamers weren't surprised. After all, he would visit them when he had the time. Eggface would place his claws behind his back and check if the gamers had broken any rules. He also paid attention to whether the excavations for the commercial shops were according to regulations. The gamers had to perform excavation for their own shops, and there was a reward. After proper management, Sherlock didn't have to worry about stepping and breaking the gamer's legs. Without the enclosed boxes, the stalls were all over the place, so it was difficult for anyone to move around. With demarcation of the impromptu stalls, there was a wide path in the middle of the stalls area. Why did you extend your leg out? Are you allowed to excavate here? Arrange your goods properly. The reputation of the entire street is ruined by you. Do you believe that I'll confiscate all your goods? After strict enforcement by Eggface and having finished their rounds in the commerce area, Sherlock nodded with satisfaction. Brew suddenly said to Sherlock, "Lord Sherlock, someone from Winterfell requests a visit to Eternal Kingdom via the teleport portal. I think it's Baron Nicholas." "Baron Nicholas? I understand, let him come over. I'll go and welcome him." Sherlock nodded and brought Eggface to the teleport portal main hall. Before long, Baron Nicholas walked out of the teleport portal. When Nicholas appeared, the gamers shouted excitedly, "Lassie, Lassie, gosh, is it a new plot? I remember, isn't Lassie the Winterfell Dungeon Lord? How do you know? This plot wasn't announced on the official website. Didn't you work in Winterfell for magic stones? Lassie is the temporary Dungeon Lord of Winterfell. You can obtain this information anywhere." The gamers were enthusiastic in both words and actions. The excited gamers were busy touching Nicholas's body. Once a gamer touched him and discovered there wasn't a problem, the rest of the gamers followed suit. Some gamers went for the purse, the sword, and the thighs. Welcome to Eternal Kingdom, Baron Nicholas. Please come to my office for a chat. As a diplomatic conflict was about to occur, Sherlock appeared and restrained the gamers who had lost control. Nicholas felt relieved. What could he possibly do? Could he kill these green-skinned creatures who took advantage of him? That was his intention. Nicholas followed Sherlock to the Dungeon Lord main hall, where Eggface brewed some bloody chrysanthemum tea for himself and Sherlock. Eggface then sat down beside Sherlock and gazed at Baron Nicholas. Please take a seat, Baron Nicholas, Sherlock said as he pointed at an empty seat. Then, he looked at Nicholas and said, Congratulations on becoming the Winterfell Dungeon Lord. How did Lord Sherlock know that I was assigned the formal post? Nicholas was taken aback. Sherlock quickly said, It's not hard to guess. After the setbacks in Winterfell, I'd be surprised if the Merchant Alliance trusted outsiders who invest large sums of magic stones in Winterfell. In this difficult time, Winterfell needs a capable baron like you. If you weren't assigned the formal post, it would be beyond reason. I'm greatly flattered. The Merchant Alliance has greater trust in longtime members. Thank you, Lord Sherlock, for recommending me for this post. Nicholas said gratefully to Sherlock. My recommendation? No, I just told the truth. Without your wise support in raw materials, we wouldn't have been able to defeat Samael that easily. Your contributions were far more significant than you thought. Sherlock heaped praises on Nicholas since he didn't have anything to lose. Sherlock said to Eggface, Quick, get a cup of underground water for Dungeon Lord Nicholas. Eggface finished his cup of bloody chrysanthemum tea and jumped off his chair. He walked to the storage shelves and took out a wooden cup, then poured water from a pot. Eggface was very good at his job. As Eggface passed the cup of water to him, Nicholas said politely, Lord Black Dragon, thank you. I'll help myself. Eggface shook his head. He looked over earnestly and said obediently, Take your drink. Why are you talking so much? Go to the side and sleep. Sherlock caressed Eggface's head and pointed to the nest at the corner. Eggface walked reluctantly back to the corner and sat down cross-legged. He looked at his computer and Nicholas, his eyes communicating his desire for Nicholas to leave so that he could resume playing his computer games. Are there any special matters to discuss, Dungeon Lord Nicholas? Sherlock placed his hands on the table and asked. It's related to my Dungeon Lord mission. Nicholas pushed Eggface's unhappiness to the back of his mind before inhaling deeply and saying, My Dungeon Lord post isn't stable. Though the Merchant Alliance has decided to assign me the formal post, there are many nobles who covet this post. Outsiders aside, there are many members of the Merchant Alliance who are also interested in the post. Hence, I am greatly troubled. Nicholas said gravely, I'll have to clear the surrounding ogre tribes. The ogres appeared recently around Winterfell, remnants of Andrew's evil deeds. I thought it would be easy to destroy them, so I sent my elite troops, but regrettably, they were annihilated. Annihilated? That's right, they were annihilated. With the support of Andrew, the ogres have become powerful. According to reports from the survivors, the powerful ogre clan is formed of more than 100 tribes. They also nominated a young and strong new leader. With these conditions, it's impossible for me to destroy them. They even recently occupied a stronghold on the outer boundary of Winterfell. Sherlock nodded and asked, What about the Winterfell garrison guards? If you deploy them, shouldn't they be able to defeat the ogres? Yes, but if I deploy the garrison guards, it will cause massive casualties. Winterfell is in an unstable state, and if there are huge losses, my competitors will create doubts about my management capability. Most importantly, I'm unable to fend off the residents' protests. Time isn't on my side. If I don't do anything and can't produce results, the nobles eyeing my position will create trouble. I understand your predicament. Do you want me to help you destroy the ogres? Nicholas said pleadingly, That's right. I know it's difficult for you, but besides you, I can't think of other capable leaders. Please help me, Lord Sherlock. I will pay all military expenses and death compensation. Chapter 344, Agreement. After Nicholas put forward his request, Sherlock pondered and said, As you know, to stop Samael and protect the Underworld's peace, we paid painful prices. 100,000 Eternal Kingdom citizens perished in Winterfell. We are still mourning over the losses. Sherlock's face was full of sadness. Nicholas turned his head to look behind him and saw a group of chatty gamers walking past the Dungeon Lord main hall. The arm of one of the gamers was broken, but as he walked, he swung his broken arm and smiled like a small kid. The eyes of Nicholas became red. Lord Sherlock, I sympathize with you and your citizens. I noticed that the pitiful gnomes aren't in a correct state of mind due to depression. Nicholas wiped his tears. That's right, but you're my friend, no, my close friend, so I can't leave you in the lurch. Moreover, the alliance between Eternal Kingdom and Winterfell is beneficial for both of us. We just experienced several battles, so the military expenditure will be huge. Though there was death compensation, it was for the families of the deceased. I also disbursed my mental distress compensation to the families of the deceased. To tell you the truth, I have invested 500 million magic stones in a huge project. I also donated 1 billion magic stones to help the poor districts. Now, I'm financially tight. Sherlock spoke thoughtfully, while Nicholas nodded and said, Lord Sherlock, I understand your difficulty. I arranged a few more boxes of materials to support you and allocated 300,000 magic stones to you for dealing with the ogres. Aya, how can I take your magic stones? Our relationship. In addition, there are 200,000 magic stones for reserve use, making 500,000 magic stones in total. I will transfer the money to you. As for death compensation, I will disburse 20 magic stones for each death. If you help me destroy the ogres and protect Winterfell, even if I go bankrupt, I'll still do it. This is the magic stone card. Sherlock slammed down on the table and stood up, saying solemnly, Am I such a devil? Though it's going to be difficult, I won't let the ogres invade Winterfell. Defending the Underworld is what all superior devils should do. I'm not doing it for the 500,000 magic stones, I'm doing it for our close friendship and my deep love for the Underworld. Sherlock took Nicholas's magic stone card and said seriously, The 500,000 magic stones aren't for me, they're for the goblins, gnomes, houndhead men, and perhaps orcs who will be sacrificing for Winterfell. I understand completely. Lord Sherlock is the hero of the Underworld. Without Lord Sherlock, we would be in a living hell, Nicholas said emotionally. Nicholas's request for help was successfully negotiated, and Sherlock soon bade a warm farewell to him. Before leaving, he said he would organize the intelligence on the ogres before sending it to Sherlock. Amidst the wild cheering of the gamers, Nicholas left Eternal Kingdom. Lord Sherlock, Nicholas is spending a fortune this time. Helping him is a wise choice. I made adjustments to our comprehensive battle plan. After Nicholas left, Brew commented. Sherlock sat down and said, Are you planning to use this chance to gain his trust, launch a sneak attack on the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall, and control Nicholas and Winterfell? Lord Sherlock, your strategy is excellent. If we conquer Winterfell, while Brew expounded upon his nth version of his plan to invade Winterfell, Sherlock was browsing the official website. A ball of fire appeared in the dungeon core, and the Winterfell Monthly Digest was thrown out. In this Winterfell Monthly Digest, there were no advertisements, only a huge bold title with the words, Bankasia Jailbreak. The terrifying plague-bearer Polio escaped from prison. It's an apocalypse. There were no advertisements. Sherlock stared at the title and remained silent for a long time. Da, da, da. A rhythmic knocking reverberated in a dark room. A tall figure sat in a chair. From the direction of the back of the chair, he was facing the main door. The main door opened, and a flabby figure stood at the doorway and said to the figure in the chair, Lord Alexandria, I've handled the Bankasia incident. I didn't leave any evidence. The figure in the shadow nodded, and the door was shut. It was silent again. Hoodlum squatted in the metal cage as he watched the passing crowd. He was imprisoned by the slave merchant and escorted to a strange small town. It was more like a camp, with many exposed quarries and huge mining devices. There were many slaves with leg shackles doing excavation work in the quarries. Fully armed soldiers whipped the slaves as they shouted, Make haste, you vile prisoners. Mining is your way to salvation. Hoodlum had become one of the vile prisoners, though he wasn't sure what crime he had committed. That wasn't important. The important thing was that the plot, screenshots of the NPCs, and his forum posts would bring him popularity. And that created financial opportunities. A bald man in white pastor clothing walked over. Ah, ignorant sinners. You'll pay with your labor and wisdom in order to obtain the Holy Lord's forgiveness. You have been judged. While the pastor was chanting, he looked at the guard to the side and asked, What crime has he committed? The guard took out a document. After examining it, he said, "This man is called Hoodlum. He killed a chicken in a village." "What?" The pastor was as pale as a sheet. He looked at Hoodlum as though he was the ugliest pile of sh*t and scolded loudly, "In the name of the Holy Lord, I sentence you to lifelong imprisonment. You'll work until your death, you scumbag." "Grand Priest, don't be angry, relax." The guard comforted the furious Grand Priest as both of them left. Then, another guard dragged Hoodlum out of the metal cage and led him to the quarry. "Quick, go and work." Hoodlum obtained a pickaxe and looked at the quarry, deciding to be subservient and wait for an opportunity to escape later. When Hoodlum smashed down with his pickaxe, a green light flashed before him, and words appeared. "A person sits in a car that is on a slippery ice sheet. The weight of the man and car is m equals 70 kg. When he receives a box with mass m equals 20 kg and velocity v equals 5 meters per second, he threw the box back at the velocity of u equals 5 meters per second. What is the velocity of the car?" Hoodlum was dumbstruck, and he said, "What the heck?" The guard at the side whipped at him and screamed, "Excavate the ores, you sinner." Dragonborn was busy recently. Because he changed factions, he had to start from scratch. Dragonborn wasn't willing to divulge his reason for doing so or the source of his magic stones. Take a spear hit and Sealhead Ling Chong asked him several times, but they didn't get any answers. Besides, it was meaningless to ask since they had already changed factions. It was just a game, and they didn't have to take it too seriously. "It's difficult. This spider's lair is too difficult." Take a spear hit had just revived, immediately shaking his head and complaining. Dragonborn took out several pieces of equipment from the teleport portal. There were other gamers behind him, and they had horrible wounds. They were guild members of For That Night with Sherlock. Victoria City had opened up the teleport portal to the spider's lair, so the gamers could explore the lair freely. The spiders that were killed couldn't be used to improve their weapons. Instead, the carcasses could be exchanged for reputation points and game currency with the 3 hamsters who took shifts in the castle. The weapon forging and improvement system in Victoria City was different from Eternal Kingdom. The weapons in Victoria City were forged using diamond seam, while other varieties of ore had to be used for weapon improvement. Other varieties of ore were rare, and they had to answer questions when mining ore. It was similar to logging trees in the Underworld. It wasn't an obstacle for the gamers. As long as they could improve their equipment, even if they had to attend college entrance examinations. The cost of weapon upgrades in Victoria City was more expensive compared to Eternal Kingdom due to the difficulty of mining ores. But that was temporary since there was a second shipment of raw materials from Eternal Kingdom. Chapter 345, Surveillance Mission. The materials were transported from Eternal Kingdom. Some of the materials were from the excavation of ores by Eternal Kingdom's gamers, which consisted partly of adamantine rocks. The remaining portions were forging ores from Winterfell's material reward for defeating Samael. The dwarves, Hill and the King, were in charge of teaching steam technology and the forging of weapons. Steam engineering wasn't developed in Victoria City yet, but Hill was kept busy, especially during the initial development stage. The blacksmith shop was in 100% production, and the sounds of hammering filled the entire shop. As for the forging of weapons, mana was required in both the underworld and the surface world. Though Hill was a steam engineer, he was also skilled at forging. During these extraordinary circumstances, as well as for the overtime pay, Hill was working diligently. Hill was in charge of forging equipment, while the King was in charge of forging in addition to equipment improvement, which was his main forte. The model for equipment improvement was the same as Eternal Kingdom, though the King's temper wasn't as hot as Simba's. Occasionally, the gamers could hear the King say, "Apologies, your weapon improvement has failed. It has disintegrated." Though the King was much gentler than Simba, he was never shy in telling the gamers about the weapon improvement failures. He was ordered to do so by Lilo. Lilo stood in the castle as she watched the King throw some broken equipment into the furnace. The equipment would be smelted before being forged into standard equipment. Big Boss sprawled on the window sill and asked curiously, "Miss Lilo, why do you allow good weapons to be destroyed before creating new ones? Should we not use this time to create weapons and improve them so that the citizens can help Miss Lilo conquer the Heavenly Kingdom?" This is Sherlock's request. He said that the citizens prefer such incidents. Lilo put down the curtains and walked into the room as she asked, "How many of the citizens are fully armed?" "According to my statistics, 926 citizens have at least one piece of equipment. There are 320 citizens that have two pieces of equipment, while less than 100 citizens have a full set of equipment. The numbers aren't fixed, as they will explore the spider's lair and meet their doom. Each time they die, they will have equipment damage." Second boss adjusted his spectacles while his furry and fat paws flipped through a thick book that contained all of the data regarding Victoria City. It's very good. Miss Lilo, I don't understand. We've had casualties of more than 10,000 over the past few days, and each citizen died at least twice per day to a maximum of more than 10 times per day. Your burden is overwhelming. We should control them and reduce unnecessary casualties. You have to take care of your health," second boss said with concern, clearly worried about her health. "This burden is negligible. They haven't been dying for naught, as they are honing their combat skills. As my loyal undying warriors, this is the fastest training method." Lilo waved her hand at the three hamsters to dismiss them. Only once the three hamsters left did Lilo show her exhaustion. It was all worthwhile for the conquest of the Heavenly Kingdom. While Victoria City was developing at a rapid pace, the gamers of Eternal Kingdom received a new plot mission. Mission title: Surveillance of the Ogre Stronghold. Mission description: the remnants of the ogre troops left by Andrew are being reorganized, and they have become strong enough to threaten our survival. We are forming an alliance with Baron Nicholas to defeat the powerful ogre tribes. The citizens of Eternal Kingdom will never be slaves. Mission objective: follow Nicholas's subordinates and perform surveillance of the ogre stronghold. We have to gather intelligence. The non-existing intelligence organization isn't able to provide any assistance. Mission reward: 300 Eternal Kingdom reputation points, 500 bronze coins, and other possible equipment. Though the reputation points and coins weren't attractive to the first and second beta gamers, the third beta gamers were in need of the rewards and the possible equipment. According to the wisdom of the first and second beta gamers, this kind of infiltration mission, one involving fighting with NPCs, had a high chance of yielding equipment after killing them if the gamers survived. This wasn't a strange encounter mission, so the mission could be accepted at the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall. The major guilds weren't going to let this chance slip by. The past had shown that battle campaign scenarios yielded handsome loot, and the gamers with excellent contributions would have high prestige. For example, in the previous encounter with Samael, the first beta gamers from the Pioneer Alliance attacked Samael and gained both attention and reputation points. As the chairman of the Pioneer Alliance, and after having survived various rumors, Arthur's prestige wasn't affected. After discovering the mission, he brought the guild members to the Winterfell Dungeon Lord main hall to register for the mission to scout the ogre tribes. The Winterfell employee responsible for the registration was dumbstruck. He didn't understand why there were so many creatures clamoring to register for such a dangerous mission. The queue was extremely long, and when the quota had been reached, the gamers who weren't registered kicked up a big fuss. "Please, give me a chance. I want to fight for Winterfell. Let me go. My skills are awesome. I'll even sacrifice myself for intelligence. In the entire Eternal Kingdom, my intelligence-seeking skill is the strongest." When Winterfell was attacked by the ancient gods' believers, most of the intelligence was gathered by me. It's the truth. Everyone claimed to be experienced and said that they were willing to sacrifice for Winterfell. The Winterfell employee hesitated and said, "I'll appeal to my superior." The gamers exploded with wild cheering. They quickly took out food and sat on the floor, some of them even beginning to shout. Selling equipment, buying a mission placement, 3,000 renminbi for a mission placement. No matter what loot I receive, it's all yours. Selling my Q position. Who has an adamantine ore? I want to learn mana engineering. Selling wood, freshly logged yesterday. Make haste. Discount for large quantities. The Dungeon Lord main hall became an instant marketplace. The employees in the Dungeon Lord main hall were dumbfounded. These creatures were from Eternal Kingdom, and they saved Winterfell twice, so they couldn't afford to antagonize them. The employees reported the incident to Dungeon Lord Nicholas, who was extremely touched. He said, "No, we'll go according to plan. This was a surveillance mission and not a tour or an attempt to feed the ogres. If there were too many creatures, they would be discovered before they could get close. They would be captured and tortured. Perhaps they would become food for the ogres. If that happened, the surveillance mission could be considered a failure. Though the gamers had the intention to camp in the Dungeon Lord main hall, after a warm refusal, they could only leave with regrets. Brainiac came and led the noisy gamers back to Eternal Kingdom. The method to lead them back was simple. Mission title: Follow Brainiac and leave the Dungeon Lord main hall. Mission description: Eternal Kingdom requires you to develop the dungeon. Please return immediately and start working. Mission objective: Return to Eternal Kingdom. Mission reward: 0.01% of the gamers will receive a full set of legendary equipment. The final interpretation lies with the game officials. As there is no money collected, it's not considered an illegal accumulation of funds. Though the gamers had doubts about this mission, they held on to the 0.01% hope of obtaining the reward and followed Brainiac back to Eternal Kingdom. Those who chose to stay also left after realizing that they had no chance to obtain the mission. The registered 100 gamers formed 50 teams, following the experienced Winterfell warriors who were mounted on beetlemans to the ogre stronghold. Sherlock explained the reason that the gamers were involved in the Winterfell military surveillance operation. Military surveillance? Give me some places on the team. They are excellent scouts, and they will help to obtain valuable intelligence. If you send them to the destination, they will do the required surveillance. Don't worry, Nicholas was more than happy to oblige. He was never in doubt of the capability of Eternal Kingdom. The contingent set off immediately, and they soon encountered the first incident. Chapter 346. Adventures of Hoodlum. The medium-sized beetleman ambled and made pa-ta sounds as it moved towards its destination. A gnome called Bond sat in the passenger's seat, holding a map as he guided the driver. A pom sound came from his back. The entire contingent of beetlemans stopped, and a creature shouted. A creature fell down. Bond frowned and threw the map onto the seat as he stood up and proceeded to the back of the beetleman. How did a creature fall down? Didn't he use a safety belt? I don't know, perhaps he was careless? Bond ignored the Winterfell intelligence officers who were whispering to each other. He opened the door of the carriage that was on the beetleman's back and looked at the convoy behind. A creature had gone down to assist the victim, who was a gnome lying motionless on the ground with unknown green symbols above his head. It was a warrior from Eternal Kingdom. Bond quickly descended the rope ladder, and a gnome walked over to him and said, "Captain Bond, a warrior from Eternal Kingdom fell from the back of the beetleman after fainting." Bond nodded. He was feeling impatient. It was only the third day of the journey from Winterfell, and he had encountered no less than 10 such incidents. These incidents usually occurred at night. They weren't the only things that troubled him either. When Bond passed by the beetleman carrying the gamers of Eternal Kingdom, a gnome peeped out and asked, 007. How many more days before we reach our destination? Shish. Bond gestured for the gnome to keep quiet, frowning while he proceeded to the location of the accident. Such questions from Eternal Kingdom's warriors, which had been asked countless times, were bugging him. These creatures weren't here to perform military surveillance but for a tour. They chatted, sang, played cards, and even fought among themselves. Then, occasionally, they would shout, "How many more days before we reach our destination?" He had never seen creatures doing such stuff. If he wasn't sure that they were helpers from Eternal Kingdom, he would have thought they were spies sent to sabotage the mission. He had never encountered such unprofessional surveillance scouts. Though he was full of complaints, Bond had received Dungeon Lord Nicholas's order to protect these gnomes and houndhead men under all circumstances, even if they had to sacrifice themselves. Bond felt that Nicholas was fawning too much on Eternal Kingdom and was unhappy. However, an order was an order, and his job was to obey orders. If he knew what these creatures were like, he wouldn't have agreed to escort them. Bond was indignant, but he made himself walk to the accident location. The gnome that had fallen to the floor had landed on his head, which was now bleeding. The accompanying doctor examined the bleeding gnome and shook his head. Bond sighed. Before they reached the destination, they already had casualties, giving him mixed feelings about the mission. Bury him and store his belongings. We'll bring them back when we return to Winterfell, Bond ordered. No, Captain Bond, he's not dead. The doctor was perplexed. He only has bruises. The pool of blood came from my menstrual period. Since I was trying to save him, I didn't stop it. But that's not important. This gnome is very strange, as there's no sign of head trauma. According to eyewitnesses, he slipped down the Beetlemon's body and landed on his buttocks. Logically speaking, he shouldn't have fainted. Is it an illness? It's possible. The strange thing is that every time they have slipped down and fainted, they have exhibited the same symptoms. The doctor pointed at the Beetleman that was carrying the gamers. A large number of gamers were sprawled on the Beetlemon's body as they looked over. They weren't worried at all and looked like they were enjoying a show. Bond felt bewildered, but he couldn't do anything, so he let the doctor carry the fainted gnome up the Beetleman. They didn't have much time and needed to make full use of tonight, when the ogres were sound asleep, to conduct the first wave of surveillance. When he passed by that Beetleman again, the gamers shouted, 007. When are we arriving at the destination? Shush. In a dark prison cell, the sound of snoring reverberated. Low clicking sounds were heard as the wounded hoodlum used a metal strip to pick a lock. He was very familiar with this lock. Within 30 seconds, he would be able to pick the lock if he wanted. As for his injuries, he was beaten by the bandits, but the wounds had healed with the help of magical potions and mana. Now, the wounds on his body were inflicted by the prison guards. They flogged him because he refused to get out of bed and was lazy during work. Though he had to get up at a fixed time, Hoodlum was unable to do so as he had to eat his breakfast first, leaving him at a loss. As for being lazy at work, Hoodlum couldn't be blamed since he had to take his meals and go to the bathroom. Other times, his friends would shout for him to join them at their barbecue, which was too good to be missed. Sometimes, he would get offline before it was time for the slaves to rest, so the guards would see a human collapsing to the ground and think he was slacking. The guards were quite restrained, so they didn't beat Hoodlum to death. However, they flogged him until his flesh tore open. The guards found it very weird that no matter how they beat him, he wouldn't stand up and work. It didn't matter who flogged him. That made the guards less furious. The guards were badly shaken by Hoodlum's perseverance, and even the slaves who were locked up in the cages were full of respect for him. He was their role model, as even if he was shackled and being viciously tortured, he didn't stop resisting. If he didn't want to work, he wouldn't work. If he didn't want to get out of bed, he wouldn't wake up. Even if he was on the verge of death, he didn't move an inch. That was a real man. Hoodlum didn't know that he had become their hero by word of mouth. Instead, he was more concerned about new plots. If there were no new plots, he had to create one. For example, a jailbreak. The guards in the room were asleep. Hoodlum opened his cage discreetly. He didn't have to keep a low profile like a cat since his spine was so badly deformed that he couldn't straighten his back. He opened the prison door and paused to listen for sounds. A guard turned over and muttered in his dream before it was quiet again. Hoodlum sighed in relief. It was his chance to break out of jail. When he was about to leave, he heard a soft voice. Hi. Hoodlum looked in the direction of the voice and saw an imprisoned elder with a white beard, whose eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. Hoodlum felt his heart tremble. This elder wasn't as simple as he looked. Little lad, I've been watching you, the elder said calmly as he looked at Hoodlum. Elder, what mission do you have for me? Hoodlum walked silently to him and asked with anticipation. Mission? No, you have to understand what you want. I want to become stronger. I want powerful equipment to make me invincible. I'm a natural fighter, Hoodlum shouted in agitation. The elder was dumbfounded, not expecting Hoodlum to have such ambitions. Didn't most people want to be rich or find love? The elder coughed a few times. Then you have to escape from the prison. Do you have a detailed plan? The elder asked. Don't be mistaken, I'm a powerful hermit skilled in combat. Due to some reasons, I stayed here voluntarily. I've been waiting for a promising lad like you. If you are able to escape and bring me with you, I'm willing to teach you what I know. Hoodlum's eyes lit up. At this instant, a guard shouted, What are you doing? Are you escaping from jail? Hoodlum was frightened. He turned his head and saw a guard getting up in a hurry. Though he wanted to escape, his leg injuries weren't healed. Even if he wanted to escape, he wasn't able to, especially with his deformed spine. He wasn't suited for combat. The guard saw Hoodlum outside his cage and raised the alarm. The other guards in the room got up and charged at Hoodlum, beating him until he was seriously wounded. Hoodlum got offline halfway through the beating. He was quite familiar with the experience. After being beaten, he would be treated and wouldn't be able to move for half a day. He didn't want to go online. Look at the cage's metal grill, and count the number of sheep. Chapter 347. It will not be less. Bond hid behind the dark rocks that overlooked the nearby ogre stronghold. Is that the ogre stronghold? Not wearing pants squatted next to Bond, who was one of the surveillance team members. In front of Not Wearing Pants was a huge fort surrounded by walls that were 10 meters high. According to the game officials, the location was a stronghold, but it didn't look like one. Warriors, you'll obey my orders, where are they? Bond turned back to look at the gamers who were walking out merrily. They didn't seem like they were scouting for intelligence, their actions looking more like defection. Don't open fire with your guns. We're defecting. Are you a fool? Have you seen any guns in this game? Oh, don't shoot your arrows. We're here to defect. We're from Eternal Kingdom and Winterfell. We have lots of information for you. This is the defense map of Winterfell. Let us in. The gamers shouted loudly. Bond's head almost exploded. He had more than 10 years of experience in intelligence work, but he hadn't seen agents walking openly and shouting to obtain intelligence. No, this wasn't intelligence gathering. What shall we do, Captain Bond? We were betrayed by Eternal Kingdom. These 100 creatures are here to defect. They even have our Winterfell defense map. Let's kill them. Captain Bond, we have to stop them. Bond's subordinates, who were Winterfell's intelligence agents, were furious. They wanted to dash out and kill the gamers. But Bond was calm, thinking that it wasn't possible for them to obtain Winterfell's latest defense map within such a short time. After Nicholas became the Dungeon Lord, the defenses were overhauled. Even if he let his subordinates dash out and kill those despicable creatures from Eternal Kingdom, it was of no use. He would even run the risk of his subordinates sustaining casualties. It wasn't a wise thing to do. He had to retreat. Everyone retreat. They'll definitely betray us. Bond gave his order. Even if the intelligence agents were unhappy, they couldn't disobey his order. The disciplined and trained Winterfell agents returned to their hidden beetlemans and left in a hurry. Before leaving, Bond wrote a letter explaining how the creatures of Eternal Kingdom defected at the first instant. It was extremely abnormal, and Bond thought that they could have a mastermind, perhaps Sherlock. Bond's letter was to inform Dungeon Lord Nicholas, who might be in the dark, to be careful of Sherlock. Bond glanced at the ogre stronghold that was behind the scattered rocks. He had never suffered such humiliation in his life as an intelligence agent. But now, it was time for him to leave. Not long after Bond ordered a retreat, a large group of ogres was led to the location where the hidden beetlemans used to be. Fortunately, Bond had left, and the ogres wouldn't risk pursuing them. Just as Bond had expected, he was betrayed by the gamers. The gamers said, "I can betray Shirley, so what's a Winterfell NPC to me? Chief, is there equipment for me? Something that fits a gnome?" In the Winterfell Dungeon Lord's office, Nicholas couldn't believe his own eyes. In his hand was a letter that he had just received, which depicted the situation at the ogre stronghold and spoke of how the creatures of Eternal Kingdom defected en masse. If he wasn't sure that the writer of the letter was his experienced intelligence agent, the best of the best, Bond, Nicholas would have burnt the letter. Those 100 warriors were recommended by Lord Sherlock and were selected out of 1,000 candidates. How could they possibly have defected? Assistant, Nicholas shouted with a frown. If that was the truth, Lord Sherlock could have a different idea. Though Nicholas trusted Lord Sherlock, he was, after all, a superior devil. Nicholas decided to make some preparations and called for his assistant, who came in with Sherlock. "Good night, Dungeon Lord Nicholas." Sherlock politely took off his hat and placed it and his outer coat on a rack. "Good night, Lord Sherlock." Nicholas swallowed hard, his hair standing on end. His assistant said, "You said that if the visitor was Lord Sherlock, I didn't need to inform you, so I brought him in. Is something the matter?" "It's nothing. Help me brew a cup of tea, the strongest kind," Nicholas said as he wiped away the sweat on his forehead. The assistant nodded and walked out to prepare the tea. As for Sherlock, he looked at Nicholas with concern and said, "Dungeon Lord Nicholas, are you feeling warm? Take care of yourself." "Thank you for your concern, Lord Sherlock." Nicholas glanced at the letter on the table and almost had a heart attack. He discreetly extended his hand and slowly moved the letter away. Sherlock noticed Nicholas's behavior. In fact, he noticed the letter when he came in. It was what he had expected. "I'm here regarding the intelligence of the ogre stronghold." Sherlock crossed his hands and placed them on his knees, speaking calmly. The assistant returned with a cup of bloody chrysanthemum tea and green tea filled with rolling sleeping worms. He placed them in front of Sherlock and Nicholas respectively. Slurp. Sherlock sipped while the tea was hot, while Nicholas held the cup and trembled. He was feeling extremely tense. Regarding the ogre stronghold? Ha, ha ha. Lord Sherlock, you're joking. Our scouts have just arrived outside the ogre stronghold. Of course, I believe in your loyal servants. They will provide the latest and most comprehensive intelligence. Nicholas gave a fake smile, but Sherlock wasn't bothered. He took out a drawn map and said, "No, the intelligence has been sent back. This is a bird's eye view of the ogre stronghold, which shows the detailed defense deployment and various campsites of the ogre tribes. Yes, we have their totems." Sherlock placed a round adamantine rock on the table, which would project images when mana was infused. After Sherlock infused his mana into the rock, images flashed like a slide projector. They were images of the ogre stronghold's interior, the tribe's totems, their leaders, and the equipment of the ogres. There were even group photographs of some gnomes with green words above their heads. Nicholas was dumbfounded. He had been a vampire for so long, and he didn't know that the round adamantine rock could record images. Where did the images come from? How did Sherlock obtain the images so fast when the journey from the ogre stronghold took 3 days? It hadn't even been 4 hours since Sherlock's servants defected, but Sherlock had brought back intelligence of the ogres? I know you'll have a lot of questions, but listen to me, and don't ask. The answers aren't something that you can bear. Sherlock put away the round adamantine rock and said, "You only need to know that I'm your strong backing and reliable ally. As for these images, they were obtained in a special way. It cost me a lot of creature resources and materials, but I won't mention them." Nicholas picked up the round adamantine rock and examined it again. The warriors of Eternal Kingdom are all fearless, especially the intelligence agents. They were born to sacrifice for the greater good. The reason they were able to obtain intelligence this fast is because of their hard work. Without their sacrifice, we wouldn't be able to obtain intelligence in a timely manner. While Nicholas was still musing over the rock, Sherlock continued and said, "Of course, we'll always remember the sacrifice of the 100 warriors, won't we, Dungeon Lord Nicholas?" Nicholas was shaken from his bewilderment by Sherlock's question and quickly said, "Yes, that's right. The 100 warriors sacrificed themselves to obtain intelligence on our enemies." Nicholas's eyes became red, and he wiped away his tears. "I'll pay 2,000 magic stones as death compensation. Don't you worry, Lord Sherlock." Chapter 348, Evil Boss. "Then I shall leave the round adamantine rock and the intelligence of the ogres here. If you have any queries, please contact me at any time. I'll bring new intelligence over tomorrow." Sherlock took his outer coat and hat and reminded the dazed Nicholas before leaving his office. Nicholas, who was shocked to the core, finally recovered, and he swallowed hard. That was Lord Sherlock, the mysterious and unfathomable superior devil lord. He was terrifying. "I thought Sherlock had allied with the ogres. This is laughable," Nicholas thought, laughing at himself. "Lord Sherlock, how did you know that Nicholas may not trust you?" From his tense expression, he was losing trust in you, Bruce said thoughtfully as Sherlock walked out of Nicholas's office. "One of the intelligence agents is called Bond, and he is the most experienced intelligence agent in Winterfell. If the gamers defected to the enemy in a bid to obtain intelligence, Bond would report this matter to Nicholas immediately, and he would be doubtful. It's a simple deduction," Sherlock said as he walked out of the Dungeon Lord main hall. Sherlock looked left and right before proceeding. "So Lord Sherlock was deducing? That's awesome. After your intervention, Nicholas shouldn't doubt you, but where are you going?" Sherlock didn't return to Eternal Kingdom, walking in the opposite direction. He didn't respond to Brew either, walking to the roadside and hailing a Hades carriage. Pa-ta, pa-ta, pa-ta. The Hades carriage slowed to a halt outside the entrance to the bustling downtown area. He could see the passers-by clearly from the roadside. Sherlock descended from the Hades carriage and paid his fees, then adjusted his black gentleman's hat and entered the marketplace. This was a wholesale distribution center. Compared to the Winterfell commercial area and shopping malls, the goods here were messy, but the prices were lower. Sherlock wasn't purchasing goods in bulk. He walked to a garment shop and knocked on the door with his cane. A gnome opened the door and received Sherlock warmly. "Dearest Devil Lord, are you purchasing goods?" Oh my God, are you Lord Sherlock? Is that you? I'm not dreaming? Oh my God." The boss of the wholesale garment shop recognized Sherlock and inhaled deeply, looking as though he was out of breath due to excitement. Sherlock smiled and said to the boss, "Don't worry, I'm here to do an equation." What did you say?" The shopkeeper opened his eyes widely and stared at him in disbelief. "I'm here to do an equation," Sherlock repeated himself. The gnome nodded and swallowed hard, then waved his hand and beckoned Sherlock deeper into his shop. The shop wasn't large, but it displayed various garments and cloth. The gnome led Sherlock into the interior chamber and said nervously, "I didn't expect Lord Sherlock to have the same hobby. I don't mean to look down on you, but I can't imagine a superior devil in love with studying. I'm unable to tell a stranger what I like to study. Haha, Lord Sherlock isn't a stranger. You're my idol, and you saved me twice. I don't know how I can." The gnome chatted incessantly, and it looked like he would never stop, so Sherlock smiled and said calmly, "Just open the door." Apologies, Lord Sherlock. I'm too excited, and once I'm excited, I talk non-stop. Just like when my granny brought me here and told me that my biggest problem is. Bruce's voice filled Sherlock's mind. Oh my God, the gnome has been talking non-stop. I think he will click well with the gamers who can chat for an entire day. They can chat using their phones and in games. To them, it's the same. Brew also started nagging. Fortunately, Sherlock had no intention to respond to them. While the shopkeeper was blabbering, a wall became distorted and turned into a huge mouth. It was a well-hidden elevator. Lord Sherlock, the descent speed is very fast. Please be mentally prepared. Sherlock nodded and walked in. The huge mouth closed. Sherlock was standing in the dim mouth and felt a fast downward movement. Like my granny said, there will be a niche for everyone. If you can't find it. The elevator descended while the shopkeeper rattled on. Before long, it stopped, and the mouth opened. Sticky saliva stuck to the upper and lower palate and formed fine threads before breaking off. Lord Sherlock. The shopkeeper was disappointed that they had arrived at their destination. He hesitated and asked, "Can we take a photograph? And can you sign your name?" The gnome took out a handheld magic camera, his eyes filled with excitement and anticipation. Sherlock extended his hand and caressed the gnome's head as he said, "Do you wish to die?" Sherlock turned his head and looked at the dark tunnel ahead, then walked into the darkness. The shopkeeper was dazed for a few seconds as he witnessed Sherlock vanish. Once he was sure Sherlock had left, he returned to the open mouth in disappointment. He kicked the inner mouth and said viciously, "Tisk, is my acting that bad? It's frustration that I'm unable to make a profit off of such a famous person." The mouth quaked and hammered the gnome with the tip of its red tongue, which came out from the inner wall. Then, a low voice said, "Be careful, little one, or I'll sue you for intentional malice." The mouth closed and rapidly moved upwards. Sherlock counted his steps in the darkness until he arrived at his desired spot, a door that was hidden in the darkness. Sherlock extended his hand and grasped the door handle, pushing it open. Before him was an entirely different scene. Numerous male and female creatures were enjoying themselves, while bloody chrysanthemum tea was being served by a waiter. Light illuminated the Great Hall, and the area surrounding the Great Hall was separated into smaller rooms that each contained a table, bookshelf, bright illumination, and a studious creature. Of course, there were couples who couldn't keep quiet. "You're bad. How dare you test me with such a question?" It's such a simple question. You're a slow female creature. Prepare to study through the night." Sherlock was feeling agitated by their words. Could they not choose other places to show their affection? And they used such a decadent way to show it, too decadent. Sherlock didn't want to stay in such a decadent environment and walked to the other end of the Great Hall. An orc waiter walked forward and asked politely, "Do you have an appointment?" "If you don't, we only have rooms available for mathematics and chemistry. For other rooms, you may have to wait. The shortest wait for a biology room is 30 minutes, and that's if the customer doesn't prolong his study." "It's not necessary, I'm a happy member." Sherlock showed his happy member identity card, and the waiter said nervously, "Please follow me." "Who would you like for your advanced tutor?" "We have various kinds of tutors." "It's not necessary, I'm here to look for your boss. Please follow me." The orc bowed to Sherlock and led him to another corridor. They arrived at a door, where the waiter bowed to Sherlock before leaving. Sherlock knocked on the door, and a hoarse voice said, "Come in, The door isn't locked. Chapter 349. Not Wearing Pants Strategy Guide on the Ogre Stronghold. Sherlock walked into the spacious room that was very dim. Behind the coffee-colored table, a soft leather executive chair turned around slowly, revealing a sludge monster wearing a dark blue checkered western suit. It has been a long time since we last met, Lord Sherlock. The sludge monster was the creature that Sherlock had looked for previously. Didn't you intend to leave Winterfell? Sherlock casually sat down opposite the sludge monster, looking as though he was back at home. The sludge monster stood up and moved to get a cup, then spat a red sticky liquid from his body into it. After, he swallowed a water bottle into his body, and soon, hot water flowed out from his body into the teacup. This is your favorite bloody chrysanthemum tea. Don't be formal, treat this place like your home. The sludge monster placed the sticky cup in front of Sherlock and then dragged his body to the executive chair, leaving a trail of sticky liquid on the ground. Sherlock looked at the strange tea and pushed the cup away with his pinky. I left. However, after seeing Winterfell encounter such a serious setback, I felt that it was a good opportunity for our group, so we came back. The sludge monster slumped in his chair and asked, "Are you here because of the jailbreak of the plague-bearer Polio?" Do you have any news? Sherlock nodded and asked, "Nothing much. Bankazia's guards are looking for Polio, and the Merchant Alliance is sending out an arrest warrant. I did, however, hear a rumor that you may be interested in." The sludge monster took out a metal stick and lit it with mana. The mastermind of the jailbreak may have been Alexandria. The sludge monster placed the hot metal stick into his mouth, and it sizzled. Alexandria? The Baron's son who came to Winterfell. Is he related to the ancient gods' believers? Sherlock stroked his chin and pondered. From the current situation, he isn't related to them. He was the one who suggested that you defend Winterfell. From my intelligence, he doesn't seem related to the ancient gods' believers. Samael seems related to the ancient gods, but it pertains to the 7 devil kings, of which Samael is a lone ranger. The rest of the devil kings won't allow the ancient gods to return, so we don't have to worry. The sludge monster gave a muffled sound and took out the metal stick, which had extinguished. Tisk. Have you drank too much water recently? The sludge monster muttered to himself. Please keep an eye on Alexandria and Polio. Contact me using our old method. Sherlock stood up and positioned his hat properly as he said, "I'm making a move. Keep in contact, Lord Sherlock." The sludge monster smiled, and the metal stick began to heat up again. Not Wearing Pants walked out of the teleport portal and scolded fiercely, "Gosh. I only stayed in the kitchen for a while, so how did they discover my spy status?" Behind Not Wearing Pants were other gamers. Some gamers smiled as they talked. "I feel that the ogres were just hungry. My equipment, it won't be easy for me to steal it from the ogres." "Gosh, you silly dude, didn't you bury the equipment at a hidden location? Shouldn't you hide the stolen equipment?" "I didn't manage to steal any equipment. It's frustrating." These gamers were from the ogre stronghold, and the equipment they were talking about was from the ogres inside it. They had been taking screenshots and collecting intelligence in the ogre stronghold for the past few days, while the rest of the time was spent thinking about how to obtain equipment. Initially, they went to the chiefs of the ogre tribes to ask for equipment. After all, they had defected and couldn't possibly fight against their enemies with their bare hands. They also claimed to be loyal to the ogres. The gamers obtained intelligence and equipment, but they had to pay a price. First of all, they had to gain the trust of the ogre chiefs by providing valuable information. The gamers were careful about their immersive roles, not forgetting that their faction was the righteous Underworld. They only divulged the number of citizens in Eternal Kingdom and the surface world's Victoria City, as well as the information about the Winterfell intelligence agents stationed outside the stronghold, including that the leader of the agents was Bond. They only managed to gain limited trust with this insignificant intelligence, so a few impatient gamers betrayed Eternal Kingdom by drawing a distorted map of Eternal Kingdom from the discussion forum and handing it over to the ogres. They were rewarded with a piece of excellent equipment. When news of this leaked out, the 100 gamers who faked their defection couldn't resist the temptation. Despite having scolded the gamers who revealed too much the second before, they rushed out to betray Eternal Kingdom for possible rewards from the ogres. They even prepared very detailed maps and a sand table to obtain their rewards. The locations of the guilds, commercial area, and forging area were given away, and they also revealed information about the NPCs. They said that Beast was betrayed by his father-in-law, that Moros was henpecked, that Simba had a terrible temper and should be killed, and that Shirley had the habit of walking around the dungeon in the afternoon. The gamers received huge amounts of equipment, though those that were slow didn't get any equipment. The situation only lasted for a few days. When the gamers ran out of intelligence to divulge, the tolerance of the ogres dwindled, they were hungry. Finally, the gamers were gathered in the kitchen, and they all soon revived in Eternal Kingdom. Though the gamers only spent a short time at the ogre stronghold, they had obtained sufficient intelligence. The most important intelligence was sewers. Not every dungeon was as poor as Eternal Kingdom, whose citizens had to go outside the dungeon and dig a pit for their bowel movements. Though, the pit had become an important source of raw materials for the bladder bombs. There were sewers below the ogre stronghold. The sewers were so dirty that normal creatures wouldn't be willing to go in, but it was the fastest way into the ogre stronghold, and it bypassed the high walls. The gamers shared their intelligence, including the sewers loophole, on the discussion forum. Within a few days, they had several different invasion plans, with the most popular post being Not Wearing Pants Strategy Guide. Ogre Stronghold, the next battle campaign scenario of Eternal Kingdom. Hello everyone, I'm not wearing pants. Omega. Due to my busy schedule, I have been unable to update my strategy guides. The 15-member instance dungeon is too difficult. After challenging it for more than a month, I feel like I'm going crazy. It's fortunate that there is a new plot, which is specific to Eternal Kingdom. I was lucky enough to be assigned the surveillance mission involving the ogres. I followed the Winterfell intelligence agents and their leader Bond to the ogre stronghold. We traveled for 3 days. Though I have played the game for half a year, this is an illogical design that I have to complain about. Is the game producer a sadist, making us travel in a realistic manner? Is it that difficult for the coder monkey to create a black screen flash to indicate the speeding up of time? There were many accidents during the journey. For instance, the Beetlemans were too small to accommodate 100 of us, so if a gamer wasn't careful, they would fall to the ground upon going offline. The game isn't friendly to nocturnal gamers. During the night, nocturnal gamers couldn't do anything while everyone was resting on the Beetleman. During the day, we had to hold these nocturnal gamers to prevent mishaps. If there was a bump or when a gamer went offline to perform some errands, an accident like falling from the Beetleman would occur. The situation is as shown in the pictures. Picture. It was fortunate there were no serious casualties. When we arrived at the ogre stronghold, we started our surveillance mission. Using the fake defection, future reversal method, we bypassed the high walls and the fortified city gate and entered the stronghold. I forgot to show you the pictures. Picture. The pictures show the outer walls of the stronghold, which were very grand. If we try to use brute force, it will be difficult for us to win the battle. I won't elaborate on the divulging and obtaining of intelligence. Whatever details we knew about Sherlock, we told the ogres. Don't blame us, it was for the equipment. I will show some pictures of the ogre stronghold. I know you have seen a lot, but if I don't show the pictures, I'll feel that I'm missing a lot of stuff. Picture. If you pay attention, one of the pictures shows the sewers leading to the stronghold. This is the crux to winning the battle. We discussed a battle plan that is appropriate for the Underworld. 1. Enter the sewers. 2. Kill the ogres. 3. Occupy the stronghold and complete the mission. Perfect. Chapter 350. Version 0.31 Update Log. Sosa Hughes. It's horrible, everything is covered with mosaic. I am unique. I can't fit in with all of you because I'm not silly enough. Super Violent Ghost. The fried gamers were the first few to revive back in Eternal Kingdom, followed by the steamed gamers. There is one gamer who isn't back yet, he is being prepared as sashimi. Midnight Sprouts. Perfect, not. I'm unable to overcome my mental block for entering sewers, lower half circle it's only a wall. If you sneak in using the sewers, won't you get blocked at the exit? Or be killed off one by one? Angle. Those were the replies to Not Wearing Pants' plan. Though some gamers objected to the plan, there were gamers who supported the initiative. Like all other plans, there were gamers who agreed and disagreed. Sherlock chose a few plans to analyze, and finally, after Brew's suggestion, Sherlock made a decision and said, let them play by themselves. Lord Sherlock, the gamers prefer a game with total freedom, so there's no need to add restrictions. Even if there is a detailed plan, they may not follow it. Among the 5,000 gamers, only half of them participated in the battle campaign. They can choose different plans to carry out the battle, Brew suggested. Sherlock thought that it was logical. After all, a perfect plan would reduce casualties, and that would reduce his income. A good plan and profit didn't go hand in hand. Sherlock decided not to intervene. Once all of the gamers who were performing the surveillance mission returned to Eternal Kingdom, he arranged for a staff meeting. Once Brainiac received notification of the meeting, he took his journal and pen and left the Adventurers Guild, returning to Eternal Kingdom via the Winterfell teleport portal. As Evelyn wasn't a formal employee of Eternal Kingdom and was just a helper at the Eternal Kingdom Adventurers Guild, she didn't receive notification of the meeting. However, from her expression, she wanted to attend. That was something Brainiac shouldn't be worried about. The outside of the Dungeon Lord main hall was filled with numerous gamers, who were discussing the NPCs entering the Dungeon Lord main hall and whether there was going to be a new plot. When they saw Brainiac walk out of the teleport portal main hall, they stared at him mercilessly. Gosh, Brainiac is here too. What kind of a plot is this? Is it that awesome? Oh my god, all of the NPCs are going into the Dungeon Lord main hall. I want to go in too. The little fairy didn't go in. She's special. Brainiac, when are you going to have a relationship with Shirley? That guy's a lunatic, pull him away. The gamers were only allowed outside the Dungeon Lord main hall. Brainiac opened the door of the Dungeon Lord main hall, entered, and shut the door. The world became quiet. Take a seat over there, Brainiac. Sherlock looked at Brainiac and pointed to the only empty seat. Inside the Dungeon Lord main hall were Simba, Mufasa, Moros, Yoda, and Beast. They were all of the employees of Eternal Kingdom. Brainiac was the last employee to arrive. He sat down in anticipation. Since all employees are here, we'll begin the meeting. I believe that everyone has heard the latest news from different channels. Sherlock looked at them and said, we received a mission from the Winterfell Dungeon Lord to become mercenaries and fight against the invading ogres. Everyone looked at Sherlock in silence. Brainiac was, as usual, reticent and without emotion. The other 6 employees were recruited via contracts and could leave after they ended, so how could they be depended on to give suggestions? Eggface was holding a disposable cup in his mouth and 2 pots of water in his claws. He helped pour water for all of them as he bent and distorted his body, looking as though he was about to splash them with the water. I called all of you here to inform you that we'll be setting off soon. Yoda will take 200 warriors, Brainiac, and Beast to set up an outpost near the ogre stronghold. Then, we will teleport via the Rune Mana formation on the airship. Sherlock continued to explain his plan. The blacksmith shop and carpenter workshop will be working overtime, so please make your preparations. What about me, Lord Sherlock? Moros looked enthusiastic as he raised his hand and asked, can I participate in the battle? Lord Sherlock, don't think I'm a vulnerable gnome. Before I was a security guard in Winterfell, I was a legendary gladiator. Of course, Moros, when we are out to battle, Eternal Kingdom can't be without any defenses. That is your role. As a legendary gladiator, only you are able to protect Eternal Kingdom while we aren't around. I strongly believe in you. Sherlock looked serious and believed in Moros. He continued to speak, the goblins need you too. Most of them are without combat experience, and only you can train these novices into strong warriors. To train them rapidly, you may have to work overtime. I hope that you're able to do so. Moros' eyes were red as he was extremely touched. Sherlock summarized their work contributions and expressed his gratitude to them for contributing to the wonderful development of Eternal Kingdom. He was also going to improve the behavior and culture of the citizens so that the employees wouldn't be verbally harassed or physically touched. Sherlock wanted to create a New Age dungeon in which everyone sacrificed themselves and worked overtime voluntarily for peace and love. After his speech, Eggface clapped for a long time. The meeting ended, and the employees walked out of the Dungeon Lord main hall. Simba was the first to walk out, and it was dead quiet. Mufasa, who was behind Simba, wasn't harassed by the gamers. When Moros walked out, there were some murmurs, while Beast's exit was met with enthusiastic voices discussing mathematical questions. Yoda was immediately hijacked by hemp rope technology and his gang. whereas Brainiac was the last to walk out of the Dungeon Lord main hall. Brainiac, are there any missions? Is there a plot? What about a plot animation for us to see? Brainiac, I want to be a lich. Brainiac, do research on me. When are you going to do research on me? Sherlock looked at the commotion outside the window. Noticing that the gamers were normal and peaceful, he wasn't bothered. He helped Eggface put away the Winterfell-sponsored chairs that were used in the meeting and wash the disposable cups so that they could be reused. After completing his work, Eggface rested comfortably in his chair. He set up his computer and started his routine of 5 hours of computer gaming. As for Sherlock, he accessed the discussion forum and added new content. Version 0.31 update. Though the warriors of Eternal Kingdom stopped Samael's evil plan, the remnants of the ogres have become stronger by the day and are threatening our survival. We can't stand by and do nothing. Added a new game version, Ogre Tribes. Added a new scene, Ogre Fortress. The expanding ogre tribes occupied the frontier sentry posts of Winterfell and built a huge ogre fortress. Using it as their focal point, the new age of ogres is starting to flourish. Ogre Fortress. This is a location occupied by many strong ogres. Currently, it has become a frightening war fortress, attracting even more ogre tribes to join. Powerful weapons, sturdy armor, and even legendary equipment will appear here. Added a new mission, Ogre's Invasion. The ogres are expanding and have their sights on the surface world's Victoria City, which has resources that they covet. The ogre's invasion is getting closer and closer. Nobody can be spared the throes of war. Amended the new NPC, Nicholas. The vampire Nicholas is Eternal Kingdom's strong ally. With Sherlock's recommendation, he has become the Winterfell Dungeon Lord. The activities of our warriors in Winterfell will be sanctioned and more convenient. Added a new empty update. I will add once I think of it.